weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil ich ein in die Arbeit einheimst komm, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil ich ein in die Arbeiter einheimst komm, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil ich ein in die Arbeiter einheimst komm, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to a slightly early edition of Socialism Saturday. And the reason that I went live about 15 minutes earlier than usual is because tonight for Socialism Saturday, we have a very special treat. You see, it is not just our friends over on Red May that do socialist live streams. There are other friends out there that do socialist live streams as well. And when I was researching for tonight's Socialism Saturday, I accidentally stumbled upon one of those new friends. Now, we have never watched this channel before. It is called Midwestern Marxism. But as it turns out, they not only are a YouTube channel, they are also, well, Charles, you don't even know what you're walking into, bro. So why don't you sit down and relax before you start shit talking? Not only is, see, I love it when conservatives come in here and they're like, socialism is awful. It's like, bro, we agree with you. That's not the point. So don't settle down. Tonight, we're going to be watching a book launch from Midwestern Marxism, because not only is this a YouTube channel, not only do they have a website, but apparently they also have a book publishing company. And it just so happens that they are doing a book launch starting in about 11 minutes. And it is for a book called The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism. Now, I do want to say, I already see Chewbacca over in their chat. I have pinned the link to the actual live stream. I know you're Chewbacca bot, obviously. I have pinned the link to the live stream to the top of the chat. And if you go over there to participate in their live chat, I'm just asking you to be smart. I don't want to see any disruption. I don't want to see anyone saying, why are you engaging in capitalism if you're a socialist? I don't want to see, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear anyone saying, why are you selling your books for money if you're a socialist? I don't want to hear it, guys. It's too simple, okay? It's way, 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 way too simple. I want people to be smart. I want you to ask smart questions. And most importantly, I don't want you to get banned out of their chat, okay? Because then the fun ends. If you get yourself banned, then the fun ends. But if you are polite, yes, and Kurt brings up another good point. Be polite so they'll keep doing this publicly. Guys, the point of Socialism Saturday is not to discredit the socialists. I think they do that just fine on their own. It is not to argue with the socialists. It is not even to disprove the socialists. The point of Socialism Saturday and why we come together to watch the farthest of the far left, the most dystopian shit you will see on YouTube all week, I promise you. The reason we do this is to understand the mind of the enemy, to listen to them say things that they usually only say to their friends or when friendly people are watching them, and to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, their perspective of the world, so that we can effectively, do something about it. So we are not going to convince anyone in their chat to not be a socialist. I really want to make sure this is clear. We are not going to convince anyone over there to not be a socialist. So the best thing you can do is to learn from them. And if you want to have a little fun in their chat, I'm not going to, stop you from doing it, but just be smart, man. We're better than that. Don't do random shit posting. I'm not a fan. All right, guys, we do have Barb also remembers the rules of the chat. Number 1, don't be a dick. Number 2, no whining. And okay, so we have Johnny the Commie is here, and Johnny is typically polite. Communists and socialists are welcome to Socialism Saturday, and as long as you follow the rules, which is don't be a dick and no whining, we welcome all political persuasions, and sometimes we are nice enough to have socialists and communists come in and talk to us. And so Johnny is confirming that these are actual Marxists. Okay, I just want to say we have the left-wing perspective here too. So guys, that is what we're going to be watching. They're getting started in about 8 minutes, which is why I started my stream over here early. And again, please don't be disruptive. I mean, come on. The moment that we start being disruptive is the moment that we start looking like them, and I'm not comfortable with that, so I don't co-sign any of that. But I do have a couple orders of business before we get started tonight. Number 1, our friends Red May are doing a stream tomorrow. And because they're being kind enough to do a stream tomorrow, I thought we would stream it too. And so Red May tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time is doing this stream called We Have Never Been Post-Industrial. So I thought we would do a little stream that I have called A Communist Engineer, Geographer, and Startup Founder Walk into a Bar, because this presentation with Red May tomorrow, it quite literally has a communist engineer, a communist geographer, I didn't know there was such a thing, and also a communist startup founder who went to the London School of Economics, which is Marxism, baby. And so they will be doing a presentation tomorrow on Red May, and we will be streaming it on the channel for a Sunday special Socialism Live, because of course we really do appreciate all the great work that Red May out in Seattle is doing this month with doing extra socialism content, and we're taking advantage of it ourselves to get just a double dose of socialism, and it's fun and we appreciate it. So that is going to be tomorrow on the channel at 2 p.m. I hope you will all set your reminder to join for that. A couple other quick announcements are, of course, please make sure you are subscribed to my main Substack, which is carlin.substack.com. This is where I do host the bulk of my really good Unwoke content is on that Substack. And of course, if you want to support the work I'm doing by funding it for $5 a month or $50 a year, you can sign up as a paying member. You get all sorts of benefits as a paying member. We actually just had a bitchcraft earlier today, which was an open Zoom call. We had a great bitchcraft. People came, like new folks came. It was great to see some new faces in the community. We do weekly community calls every single Monday at 7 p.m. and every single Wednesday at noon. Bitchcraft is a once a month special edition affair, but that is one of the perks you will get access to. You will also get access to the supporter Discord. And the supporter Discord is where we host Writers Group on Thursday nights. And it is also where we host Movie Night on Sunday nights. And we do watch a new movie every single week. And tomorrow we have one of my selections. I finally got to pick out a movie. And I want to show you what movie we're watching because I'm really excited about it. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., supporter Discord. We are watching the cult classic, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. If you've never seen this movie, you need to see this movie. It should be like required viewing. It is one of the best cult classics that has ever been made. It holds up over time. It's got a great soundtrack. You are going to love it. We're going to do trivia. We're going to talk about the movie. Come join us in the supporter Discord tomorrow night at 8 p.m. and we'll have a great old time with that. If you need a link to the supporter Discord, I do send out a weekly email on my Substack called the Unwoke Roundup. This goes out on Sunday, so this is last week's Unwoke Roundup. Tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to be sending out a new one. And in that Unwoke Roundup, when you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you're going to see there is a section for paid supporters with your supporter perks. That includes your 2 Zoom links. That includes your link to the supporter Discord. It includes anything else that you need to know. That's where you find it if you are a supporter on my Substack. If you are a supporter in my locals community, my Patreon, or even on this here YouTube channel, I will be posting the link out to supporters tomorrow afternoon. So make sure you get into the supporter Discord. Tell us where you're coming from in the verification channel. We'll check you off on the box, and then we will welcome you to have movie night starting at 8 p.m. tomorrow. And again, we are watching Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which is going to be amazing. Last big announcement before we get started is I do have a new design officially up in the Unwoke Art store. And this one is, well, a little bit of a, no offense, Johnny the commie, but a little bit of a middle finger to the socialists and the communists among us. I wanted to do a design called Be Bourgeois. It is of this fox, because in order to defeat the woke left, you do have to be clever as a fox and be able to adapt to new things around you, and to be able to be quick-witted and also embracing that capitalism with a nice dry sense of humor. This is going to be one of the signature designs in my Unwoke Art store, and you can get it now on t-shirts, on hoodies, on everyone's favorite, the mug. The black mug is coming out really good. Those colors are looking spectacular. You can get it on stickers, and you can get a poster. If you would like any other type of merchandise, please do let me know by leaving a comment on this post on my Unwoke Art Substack, which is unwokeart.substack.com. And this is where I post my new designs in the Unwoke Art store every time I launch a new design, and also when I just have a story about a design or other Unwoke art related things. So that is another one of my Substacks that you can subscribe to if you feel so inclined. Last thing before we start our countdown is, of course, we do play Socialism Bingo on this channel. I'm going to pop the bingo card into the chat. Sin! Thank God. Sin, we were just talking about you. We were like, where the hell has Sin been? We were worried, Sin. Sin is here. Everyone calm down. Sin is okay. Sin must be protected at all costs. Guys, we do play Socialism Bingo during Socialism Saturday. I just popped the bingo card into the chat. Go ahead and click generate your card. You get a free square in the middle, and then we're going for lines or we're going for corners. If you're lucky, you got one of those bingo cards that has solidarity twice. That is my own little form of equity out to you, is that I screwed up in the bingo card. Well, Johnny, I'm allowed to design merchandise, bro. That's the way the capitalism works. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy it. It's the way it is. But this is just to keep us interested. If you get bingo, shout out bingo in the chat, and we will celebrate you and your rousing accomplishment. All right, guys, that is all we have. Let me get the sound set up for our stream today. And again, if you're going to go into the chat on the other stream, I ask you to please be respectful. I don't want to see any shit posting. I don't want to see any, why are you charging money for something if you're socialist? I don't want to see any of that, okay? I really, really don't. We are better than that. Ask good, thoughtful questions. We are not going to change anyone's mind tonight. This is a learning experience to be able to learn what they're all about, and what they think and how they see the world, and that's why we're watching it. And I'm really excited for this book launch, and I've got a couple of hard seltzers down in my little cooler over here that I will be partaking of. I hope you have a drink as well. Hang on. I've got some hard seltzers. I've got some strawberry orange. I've got some grape. I've got some vanilla orange coconut, and I think I've got a vanilla orange as well. I'm going to start off with this vanilla orange hard seltzer. If you're drinking something fun tonight, please go ahead and put it in the chat, and hopefully we'll be getting started over there soon. Drinking something, it's so hot, and this seltzer is so nice and cold. It's so hot here. Is it hot anywhere else? Oh my word. Okay, let me just refresh just to make sure. And I do like to keep this chat up on the stream when we're watching like this, just because it adds a little bit of variety. So I know it makes the video a little bit smaller, but sometimes capturing what happens in the chat is absolutely worth it. I've got an orange and vanilla hard cider here. Or hard seltzer, rather. Hard seltzer. I've never had these before, so I'm actually rather excited to try. Trendolin is over there. Trendolin has not been banned yet from that chat. She did get banned from Red May, sadly. Trendolin, too much of a capitalist for Red May. Ooh, it's nice and peachy. Oh, it's so pretty. Look at that beautiful color. Oh, look at how pretty that is. Oh, it smells so good. That is delicious. Wow. Excellent job on this hard seltzer. All right, let me refresh again. Come on, guys. We're waiting, Midwestern Marks. We're waiting. We're anxious to hear you guys. If they don't go live, we'll just watch something else. So it won't be a big deal. But we are on their timetable today because we are watching their YouTube channel. It's always fun when these happy coincidences work out, isn't it? Abolish NATO. What an interesting name in the chat. I don't disagree there, actually. Oh, you know, what can you do, Vince? Got to be a good boy for your mom. Maybe socialists have the same issue I do with never being on time to things. Is it going? And I just didn't know because I didn't refresh. Nope, still not going. Still not going. Any bets on how long it'll take for someone to tell them that we're watching their stream? When will the haters show up? But we're very nice, I think. Yes, this is supposed to be live. Well, allegedly. No, bot. Cool it. Did they say 5 minutes in the chat? Guys, we're interacting with real Marxists today. How fun is that? 10 minutes? Oh, gosh. Well, I hope you guys are all having a great day. It's been a busy day. This is so delightful, though. It makes up for all of it. Yes, Johnny the Commie, you're welcome to recommend. I can't guarantee I'll watch it, but you're always welcome to make a recommendation. Guys, this amazing vanilla orange hard cider that I'm drinking right now is from Ouzel Finch Beers. And that is in Virginia. And they do really good beers. I enjoy it quite a bit. Yes, Marxists do generally suck at technology. God, Trendolin, is there a Marxism theme song? Come on, Marxists, we're waiting. We really want to learn from you today. The capitalist gremlin is at it again. I started early in everything. I was considerate. I showed up on time. Marxists, so inconsiderate sometimes. I hope Autumn does come back again. Autumn is always welcome here because Autumn is polite. Autumn is our kind of new socialist friend that has been showing up every once in a while, and we welcome that. I mean it, guys. Like, I don't care what your politics are. I truly don't. I don't care, like, if you're on the left, the right, the center, if you think it's all bullshit like me. I don't really care. It makes no difference to me. As long as you're nice and polite and you don't insult me and you don't insult other people in the chat and you aren't disruptive, like, I really, truly don't care. 41 people waiting on their end, 107. Guys, please make sure you mount that like button while we're waiting. I would appreciate that. Mounting the like button lets people know that that you are enjoying the stream. And I know nothing's really happening yet, but we do hope something will start happening eventually when this live stream starts. As you know, I can't control the socialists and make them show up on time. If I could, I would. But hopefully they'll be starting soon. I can see people are also always already over there making friends, influencing people. Take advantage of the pause and mount the like button. The socialists are queering our Socialism Saturday by not starting on time. It's true. Hey, I was early today, Fish Addict. I started early in preparation for the 6 p.m. start time of this stream, all right? Well, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to welcome in other people. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. I am not going to kick people out of my chat because you don't personally like their sensibilities. It's not the way this works, so I'm sorry. Carlin, thoughts on Anne wearing the red Oh, I thought it was beautiful. I thought Princess Anne wearing that red feather at coronation to purposefully block Harry, it was amazing. I mean, what a troll. And apparently they really did plan that. That wasn't an accident. They all planned that. That was Anne's idea, I've heard, through the royal gossip mill. Johnny the Commie says, if this video is taking too long to start, I recommend you watch Why Socialism Failed in the West. I may do that at some point, but I'm really hoping that they do this live stream. I really am. I want it to get started. Where are they? Are they, Johnny the Commie, are they usually late? Like, is this normal? I just discovered them today. I have no idea who they are. Truly Anon says, so are we late because schedules are an invention of colonialist capitalism? Yes, Truly Anon. Excellent. Excellent question. Well, I'm aware there are a variety of experiences, but again, no one is forcing you to be here. So if you don't want to be around people with a variety of experiences, and remember, my husband is from Ukraine. Like, if you cannot stand to be around people of a variety of experience, then I don't know what to tell you. But I'm not going to kick people out just because you don't like them. I'm sorry. All right. Well, then we're good. All good. Sam in their chat seems to think that this is technical issues. Maybe. We do know through experience that socialists are not always great with technology, particularly audio. So remember, guys, if they're having technical difficulties or audio difficulties on their end, there's only so much I can do about it. We do try. I am not. I am of French and Irish heritage with a dash of Native American indigenous people thrown in there. My husband is 100% Ukrainian, but they are from the Russian speaking parts of Ukraine. And so that is his first language. Truly Anon over in their chat says they are being truly anti-racist by deconstructing the racist invention of schedules used to oppress minorities. That is exactly right. I'm not doing a land blessing, William. Don't start rumors in their chat. God. Come on, Midwestern Marx. We're waiting impatiently. I know we're all capitalist over here, but it's very rude to keep people waiting. Yes, or a land blessing, as it were. Absolutely. Shout out, Benjamin. Who else do you want to be banned by, bot? Let me just refresh again, just in case. Sometimes I find refreshing starts things. If for no other reason than you're tempting fate. Oh, goodness. Well, I do apologize for the wait, guys. Here is the description of the book that they're talking about today. In The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, Carlos provides a comprehensive development of his concept of the purity fetish, tracing the outlook to the Dialectic school of ancient Greek, of ancient Greek philosophy, and showing how it has appeared in 20th century Marxism and in contemporary U.S. socialism. In every form the purity fetish takes in Western Marxism's politics, one finds not only the failure to obtain truth, but the inability to create a revolutionary movement. And it has several endorsements by people I have never heard of, but that's all right. And this is being published by Midwest Marx, very own book publisher. Like, I guess they have a book publisher component to it, so good for them. Engaging in lots of capitalism over there. But remember, they are allowed to engage in capitalism because they are simply using the tools of the bourgeois in order to survive within a bourgeois capitalist society. And so they're forced to use the reason that we don't go over there and say, why are you engaging in capitalism if you're socialist, is because the Communist Manifesto quite literally says that rule doesn't apply to like small businesses or mid-sized businesses. It only applies to the bourgeois, and everyone else is just, using the tools of the oppressor in order to survive until they attain their little Marxist revolution. And so they're allowed to, in their philosophy, to sell things and engage in capitalism. That's the way it goes. God damn it, bot. Bot, you are being a bad example. Barb says, "Hey chat, I bought 2 mugs from the Unwoke art store and they're really, really nice. Sent out 2 to 2 girlfriends for Mother's Day. One already received hers and is happy about it." Excellent. No, they have their own audience as well, which is good. Oh, Regional Range is over there. Regional Range was also the hate watcher that ratted me out to Red May. And of course, nothing ever came of that. And there was no copyright strike that materialized because Jordan Peterson is also one of the hate watchers that ratted me out last time. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how the same hate watchers always show up because they're obsessed with me and they just can't get enough, and they always have to come in and try to destroy everything because they have nothing else to do in their sad, pathetic lives. But too bad, so sad, guys. Reaction streams are allowed. Cry into your pillow for all I care. But in order for them to do anything about it, they'd actually have to start the stream, which would be really great if they would just start the effing stream. Already 15 minutes late. Yes, see, Johnny the Commie says that I'm correct. You are right. We have to survive within capitalism. That is why we use things like smartphones. See, I know your philosophy, Johnny. I read your books. I listen to your talks. Emphasize says, Facebook labeled adult human female as unsafe. I did hear about that. I agree. Adult human females are unsafe and their rights are under attack. I mean, I would say that everyone's rights are under attack, but hey, that would be just me.
Launch event for our own Carlos Garrido's, in my opinion, absolutely groundbreaking new book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism.
All right.
We've got some amazing people here with us, without whom this event would not be happening. But before we get to that, I want to say a few words about the necessity of understanding the purity fetish and why that book is so important. So let's get started.
I will still be doing commentary over this. That blew me away, though. That was really loud. I think my socialist introduction is better, if I'm honest about it. I really do think it's much better. Well, they do have a theme song. We're a big fan of communist music on this channel. Our song is better. It's true. Much better. My intro has a countdown and everything. Yep, it's true. I know, Johnny. We're all excited. We're very excited. See, they're gonna say MLK is a socialist, which he was. You know, that's just fact. Hopefully these guys will be much nicer to play with than Red May. You're muted. Oh, wait, no, I muted them.
Over half of our population
that was an accident.
Struggles paycheck to paycheck. Finance capital is fully consolidated and become really the primary mode of capital accumulation within our ruling class. And this is felt all over the working classes. The middle class American dream is effectively dead in the 2020s, and our standards of living are deteriorating at a rate we haven't ever seen before.
I would dispute that.
But it isn't all doom and gloom. This reproletarianization is forcing people all over the country, all over the world, really, to wake up from that dream.
Do you guys think the middle class dream is
and realize that it just isn't possible to continue on in the old way anymore? Something's got to give. Something's got to change. And this is where we seem to hit a snag. The ideological problems of the left that we get smacked in the proverbial face. What is wrong with this guy's voice? When we begin trying to organize and trying to work to fix things. I don't think I have to tell anyone here what a mess a lot of the modern so-called left is.
No, you don't.
Fetish, its analysis, and its central position in the
we already agree on something. We hate the modern left too.
Grounded in our own revolutionary history, passed to us from people like Du Bois and Winston, Foster, MLK, and so many others. This is an antidote to the ideological problems rampant on the left. It was an absolute honor to be able to edit this book. And before we begin, I just want to say that I'm incredibly proud to call Carlos not just a brilliant and fearless comrade.
Carlos
but
does
a
look like a classic.
So with all that out of the way, let's get to what everybody really came here for. Eddie?
Yes, thanks, Noah. And first of all, before we get into it, I'd like to thank Noah for helping to organize this event and for everything that he does for our project here at Midwestern Marx. Behind the scenes, without Noah, organizing an event of this scale would have been absolutely impossible. So thank you, Noah. And thanks also to our amazing guests for being here today. We encourage the audience to check out their organizations after this book launch, as they're all doing amazing work. Professor Gabriel Rockhill's Critical Theory Workshop has been putting out great analyses of what they call the global theory industry.
They have a critical theory
looking
workshop.
at the production
it's almost like
of political and economic theory, as well as their sources of funding, which has been really enlightening stuff and informative for us here at Midwestern Marx. We also have Radhika Desai and Alan Freeman with us, who have been organizing an alliance for socialism and against capitalist imperialism with their international manifesto.
Johnny, why do all socialists
look like they have a giant stick up their ass? I'm
not judging. I'm just saying they always look
struggle against the new Cold War foreign policy of the Western imperialists.
So
we're extremely grateful to have such knowledgeable and well-respected academics and comrades with us here today to launch this book. And we look forward to more collaboration with them in the future. So again, be sure to follow their websites and their social media for more fantastic information, which all helps to inform our world outlook here at Midwestern Marx.
Awesome. Our first speaker is Thomas Riggins. Thomas is a retired philosophy teacher from NYU, the New School of Social Research.
Oh, good.
Others.
Retired NYU
from
professor.
The CUNY Graduate Center in '83. And he's consulting editor for the Midwestern Marx Institute.
I almost went to NYU.
He's been active in the civil rights and peace movement since the 1960s, when he was chairman of the Young People's Socialist League at Florida State University.
Oh, look, they think they're owning
he
me
also
in the
worked
chat.
for CORE
Oh,
in voter registration in North Florida. He has written for many online publications like People's World and Political Affairs.
This is why guys
were
polite,
editor.
Because they make themselves look like assholes
Bertrand Russell Society
in their chat.
He was president of the Corliss Lamont
and so
chapter in New York City of the American Humanist Association. He's the author of Reading the Classical Texts of Marxism and Eurocommunism.
Johnny, that's no way to go through
Santiago
life.
Carrillo and Eurocommunist revisionism.
You know?
Here's Thomas.
Well, going to introduce this book in the spirit of our comrades from the Middle Flowery Kingdom. I have the 5 takeaways that we need to have from this book. I should reformulate that as the Middle Flowery People's Republic.
Thank you, Yasmin.
The 5 takeaways for the purity fetish. After you've heard the other speakers and I've had a chance to read the book, these are the 5 most important things I think that you'll have to remember. One is we have to take away the idea that
how does that sound?
Those Marxists
how does my sound compared to them?
Accept the reality of states and peoples who are struggling to institute socialism, to build Marxism in their countries, that have faced failures and are unable to make mistakes, that this does not mean that they're supposed to be rejected and denounced as traitors to Marxism because they're not living completely according to some ideal idea of what Marxism and socialism is supposed to look like. The real world is very different from the ideal world, as we learned from reading Hegel. It's one thing to say,
don't learn things from Hegel. That's just a bad idea.
Civil war to make it begin to happen. The second takeaway is those people who dismiss certain elements of the working class in this country, especially in this country, but other countries too, because they are backwards in their thinking, reactionary thinking, they have racist ideas, whatever the problems are that make these
we're all racist,
people hostile
ding, ding,
to us
ding, ding.
Or hostile to progressivism.
I mean, you're white, you understand that, right? You're like an old white man.
You should remember it's the system that's creating these people, and our job is to educate them and try to free them from the shackles.
I mean, Johnny, no need to do that. Like, do what you want, but
instead of denouncing them as deplorables and useless and trying to ignore them. That's the second thing.
Well, not
Carlos,
calling them racist
one of the 5
would be a good first step.
Carlos puts forth in that book. That's the second takeaway I think we have to make. The third takeaway we have to do is fight back against dumping on China from the left. This seems to be something that is incorrigible in the press now because of the Cold War starting up with China.
Oh, again. That's good.
Academic leftists
They're fans of China.
The petty bourgeois leftists that claim to be Marxists want to attack China, call China capitalist because it has to go through these reforms to try to.
Oh, they think China's too capitalist.
Living standards of their people. We all know the struggles that are going on in China. And so we have to fight back and it's not our job to defend China, but it's our job to explain to people the reality of what the Chinese struggle is, and that that's a form of defense. But I don't want to be labeled as defender of the Chinese, but at least explainer of what's going on there and why we should support the Chinese and support the Chinese government in its efforts to increase the living standards, not only the Chinese,
this is a former NYU
but to
professor.
bring about more peaceful world that we live in, and to bring about real foreign aid to the peoples of Africa and South America.
Johnny,
instead of the phony type of foreign aid the United States
not nice, Johnny.
Giving it requires them to
nice
vote
you,
the way
Johnny.
we tell them to in the United Nations.
And I'm not. Well, I guess I kind of am right.
The fourth takeaway is,
I guess,
the people who ignore the
not really right
history
wing
of the United States. The people who want to dump Lincoln statues are being tossed away now in some ultra-left groups. It's true that our country has a checkered
tell that
past
libertarian they're soon be dead folks. Oh, that's nice of them.
Nevertheless, there were people back in those days that fought against that, even though they didn't have the advanced
I would say the chances of him being profoundly stupid are very high.
Slavery was wrong. They tried to do something to eliminate slavery. They may have been caught up in the system themselves because they were economically in the plantation system. But we have to.
Johnny, this is not a libertarian raid. I'm turning down the sound for a second. This is not a libertarian raid. Half of the people watching this aren't even libertarian, Johnny. You're fundamentally mischaracterizing us, and I don't like it. We've been nothing but nice to you. We're just listening. I have told people to not be disruptive. Settle down.
Have no country. We can't forget that we are actually internationalists. But we can tell them they do have a country.
This is why we don't interact with the communists unless we have to. They're liars.
But it's not as bad as people who think that we're
Johnny just gave away all his goodwill
and something. We have to give everything back to the original inhabitants. Okay, that's the fourth thing, and the last thing is the left is soft on the anti-imperialism front. There's too many people on the left who are also flying Ukrainian flags in their backyard or on porches.
I agree.
And we have to remember that.
Excellent. More
any
alignment.
Struggle against the major enemy of the world's people, which is U.S. imperialism, by far the most bloodthirsty killing machine since World War II.
I'm also not right wing, Johnny.
The Vietnamese they killed and the number of North Koreans that were bombed out far exceeds anything any left group or any left country has done with as a communist country or as a socialist country, or even as a bourgeois country. I'm talking about Russia, which is abandoned communism, but nevertheless plays a progressive role against U.S. imperialism. Then that's the common enemy of humanity right now. And they should be getting, at least we should be supporting them, if not outright cheering. We should at least be supporting their right to defend themselves from NATO and the use of other countries like Ukraine as puppets and proxy wars against them.
See, more alignment.
If we read Carlos's
with the
book
proletariat
and see that the purity fetish or those Marxists.
No, I'm not on the right. I'm very socially liberal.
Who, in the name of trying to be true Marxists, don't accept any of those 5 takeaways that I put out. Do we understand that these people are, whatever their good intentions are, we on the left and in the Communist Party at least had a distinction between objective and subjective enemies. And they may be subjectively communists and friends, but they are objectively helping U.S. imperialism. And I think reading Carlos's book will make anybody who's not aware of that aware of that. And this book is a big advance in the struggle here in the United States.
I appreciate that summary, Thomas. Thank you, NYU professor, even though he froze in kind of an awkward position.
That was brilliant. Our next speaker is going to be Radhika Desai from the International Manifesto Group and a lot of other stuff. Dr. Desai is a professor at the Department of Political Studies and director of the Geopolitical Economy Research Group at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Canada. She's proposed a new historical materialist approach to understanding world affairs and geopolitical economy based on the materiality of nations.
Well, I am very right economically, but I'm very left socially, so do with that as you will. I do not consider myself right-wing, and I'm allowed to define myself, and it's not your job to identify me.
Coronavirus and war, a geopolitical economy, which is quickly becoming my favorite as I make my way through it, by the way. Her articles and book chapters appear in international scholarly journals and edited volumes. She co-edits the Geopolitical Economy from Manchester University Press and the Future of Capitalism book series from Pluto Press, along with Alan Freeman.
Pluto Press we've watched before.
Thank you so much, Noah.
Oh, you're muted, Radhika.
Thank you so much, Noah. And I have to say it's a great privilege to be part of this book launch. Chiefly because I think this is a critically important book. I think it's critically important for all on the left, particularly in the English-speaking countries, to read it. And it is actually very clear.
You think anyone to the right of Mao is not on the left, so I don't trust your judgment.
Dialectics, which is much maligned and misunderstood in the English-speaking world. I remember my own teachers who taught me Marxism dismissing a lot of what is dialectics as Hegelian mystical fog. What you find in Carlos's book is a very clear discussion of dialectics, why it matters very, very practically today. In the few minutes I have, I want to liken Carlos's discussion of the purity fetish the inability of the Western left to give up its juvenile longing for some sort of pure socialism and embrace socialism in its inevitably soiled reality, its inevitably soiled earthy reality. And I want to liken this to Marx's discussion of the fetish character of commodities. Carlos argues at the close of his introduction, and I'll be quoting Carlos a lot and I'll be quoting Marx a lot. So Carlos argues at the close of his introduction that what can help overcome Western Marxism's
it's just a shame he's not listening to the talk.
To terms with the reality of real struggles for socialism, the real working class, etc., and the realities of American history is not simply, as Losurdo argues, learning to build a bridge between different temporalities found in Marx's notion of communism. That is, on the one hand, a utopian remote future where society inscribes on its banners from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, and the actual future where communism is described as the real movement which abolishes the present state of things. And I just like to underline that actually practically no one I know fully understands what the real movement is when Marx refers to it.
Explain it
and why it's important. So I think Carlos's book is very important for that. So what Carlos is saying here is that the intellectual move, the intellectual understanding of what is wrong is not enough. Just as the intellectual recognition of the source of value is not enough to banish the fetish character of commodities, the mystical character that attaches itself to the commodity thanks to its social form, a social form in which the equality of the kinds of human labor takes on a physical form in the equal objectivity of the products of labor as values. The measure of the expenditure of human labor power by its duration takes on the form of the magnitude of value of the products of labor. And finally, the relationships between producers within which the social characteristics of labor are manifested
Yasmin, ask him
take
why.
on the form of a social relation
Please.
between the products of labor. This is me quoting Marx. Marx is what Marx describes as the fetishism of commodities. And his point is it inheres in the social relationships. This social significance of commodities is something above and beyond simple use values has been hard for political economy to grasp. And it continued to dog comprehensions of capitalism and the dynamics of its basic cell, the commodity. And this continues up to the present day. And Marx says, just like Carlos, mere comprehension, however, of this reality is not going to be enough to remove the mysticism and replace it with clarity. That clarity can only be achieved by a clarification, that is to say, a transformation of the social relations. And I'm quoting Marx again here. The belated scientific discovery that the products of labor, insofar as they are values, are merely the material expressions of the human labor expended to produce them, marks an epoch in the history of mankind's development.
Shit.
But, he emphasizes, by no means banishes the semblance of objectivity possessed by the social characteristics of labor. Something which is only valid in this particular form of production appears to those who are caught in these relations of commodity production, namely ourselves who live in capitalist societies. It appears to them to be just as ultimately
the Marxists are threatening to block
as the fact
people.
That the scientific dissection of the air
Shame.
into its component parts left the
Guys, be smart and ask good questions, all right?
Unaltered in its physical configuration. So Marx is saying that just intellectually comprehending this is not going to remove the mystical character of commodities, the fetish character of commodities. The reason is that the appearance arises spontaneously, not from thought, but from practice. And again, Marx says, men do not, therefore, bring the products of their labor in relation with each other as values because they see these objects merely as material integuments of homogeneous human labor. The reverse is true. by equating their products to each other in exchange as values, they equate different kinds of labor as human labor. That is to say, this equation is made in our practices. And as long as those practices continue, that impression will always linger. It will always be difficult to see through that. So this means, again, in Marx's word, that the veil of the mystical character is not removed from the countenance of the social life processes.
The people spamming the chat aren't the libertarians. Just for the record.
Production,
Midwest Marx may think that, but that's not actually happening.
Freely associated men, and stands under their conscious and planned control. The mystical character of commodities will only be removed, Marx is saying, when we transform those relations that give rise to it, which is we transform capitalist relations of production into socialist relations of production, in which we consciously plan and control the larger productive economy.
Who plans
so
and controls
to continue with Marx, this,
economy?
However, Marx says,
who is in charge of planning and controlling the larger productive economy? Yasmin, please ask that question. Who is in charge of planning and controlling the larger economy?
The natural and spontaneous product of a long and tormented historical development, which here, and finish quoting Marx, Marx is basically saying that this situation of socialism will only arise as a result of a long and tortuous development, which is exactly what Carlos is referring to when he says that the purity fetish
you got blocked,
does not permit a recognition of real advances towards socialism. So Carlos's argument in the purity fetish is very similar. The purity fetish, Carlos says, cannot be removed by mere intellectual advances. It requires the emergence of a
Don't give up on that question, Yasmin.
Left. Only then the purity fetish will go away. And Carlos says, although this is important, that is to say, the intellectual understanding is important, a more accurate cure is for Western Marxism to reflect on the objective conditions which drive its purity fetish. And once self-conscious of these, move towards changing these objective conditions. And this he puts into bracket, although I think this is actually the most important part. Which means
I think the most important part is who is in charge of planning and controlling the larger economy under socialism.
A working class
I think that's the most important part.
Free of the dominant influence of the professional managerial class iron triangle of institutions and culture.
That nerd has more people watching than you do,
Carlos's
Cobra.
argument is that the purity fetish is rooted in the division, the separation of intellectual and manual labor, which in late capitalism has developed into a veritable class divide, which is also, by the way, a national divide in which the intellectual and manual elements of the working class occupy not just different parts of cities, but also often different countries. And that is why, of course, the struggle for socialism must always be anti-imperialist. So what Carlos is saying is that unless we move on from this sort of PMC-dominated left, the professional managerial class-dominated left, towards a left that is connected with the real struggles of working people worldwide, we will not be free of the purity fetish. So we must read Carlos's book not just as an attempt to take us intellectually beyond the purity fetish, but also as a call to create an absolutely different kind of left, the kind of left that Marx and Engels originally tried to build when they first came into contact with working people and set about trying to create an international organization of working people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was absolutely brilliant. Our next speaker is going to be Eddie Liger Smith, our very own Eddie Liger Smith. Eddie's an American political scientist and specialist in anti-imperialist and socialist projects, especially Venezuela and Cuba. Or I'm sorry, China. He's both an editor and
China and Venezuela. Sorry. Just wanted to be clear.
Yes, I apologize.
No
He's both
worries.
an editor and political economy analyst at the Midwestern Marx Institute. He's also research interests in the role Southern slavery played in the development of American and European capitalism and the American healthcare system. His most recent work can be found on the Midwestern Marx Institute website and in the Journal of American Socialist Studies, Volume 2. Go ahead whenever you're ready, Eddie.
Sounds good. Actually, I had a little bit of a technical difficulty here with my Word document. I just closed it, so bear with me here as I pull that up. But really honored to be here with such amazing speakers and so many people that I look up to and have helped inform my own world outlook. So I'll do my best here to follow that great presentation from Professor Desai. So hello everyone, my name is Eddie Liger Smith. I co-founded Midwestern March with Carlos
they've never seen them
after the
there
Bernie
before.
campaign ended
Doesn't
in
that
2020.
inhibit book sales?
Also, when Carlos and I were graduating our undergraduate
like
degree,
you're just banning people that you just don't know?
Together. And I got involved
From
with
a book
socialist
launch?
organizing when I was in high school after Wisconsin's Governor Scott Walker busted up the teachers' unions while claiming that the teachers were greedily driving up the state debt with their massive
The teachers
salaries.
were greedily driving
so
up the
Governor
state
Walker
debt.
then turned around after cutting the teachers' salaries to fix the debt and gave a multi-million-dollar government subsidy to this multinational
Well, then he's
corporation
obviously
called
a chill
Foxconn
that
that had
doesn't believe
donated a lot
anything
of
he
money to
says,
his
Johnny.
campaign, which further drove up Wisconsin's state debt that currently stands at well over $20 billion. So the debt has not been fixed as Walker promised, although my working class teacher father has at least $5,000 less in his salary each year. So after
then he should go get a
that
real
experience
job.
and after learning about Bernie Sanders and doing some research into Scott Walker and finding that he was an utter puppet of the Koch brothers and other oligarchs, I sent myself on a mission basically to overthrow these corrupt politicians, or at least expose them to the people, and create a government or an economy that actually serves the working people in this country, people like my mom and dad, and not people like the shareholders at these multinational corporations. So after leaving for college in 2016, which is where I would meet Carlos, I decided to major in politics. And in 2020, I threw myself, along with Carlos, into the Bernie campaign and groups like the Democratic Socialists of America, who seemed like the best option to reform or revolutionize our system. And since that time, since joining the left, to put it frankly, I've often found myself wondering what the heck is wrong with the American left. How do we live in a society where the corruption of politicians like Scott Walker is so blatant, where the congressional approval rating sits around 17%, and yet remain unable to organize a mass movement of working people against these corrupt politicians and their donors? So the answer to my question of why the Western left has failed to organize a substantial revolutionary movement is complex, but I've yet to find a better answer to this question than Carlos's new book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism.
What is the answer?
Which is why we feel that this is such an important text. The book addresses in a theoretical and honest way some of the particular stances of the American left that had never made any sense to me in my practical organizing experience.
Like what?
Such as the idea that we can't reach out to working class Republican voters or Trump supporters and teach them about Marxism, because this would qualify as recruiting fascists.
That's actually a good
this
point.
Was an idea that always
populists have more in common than they
who
disagree
had lived
on.
Among working class Midwestern Republican voters my whole life, and who knew that while most of them are politically confused or backwards,
the fact that they figured that out should terrify everyone.
Are not fascistic.
Because they're not
and many
wrong.
of the older ones only stopped voting Democrat when the party abandoned organized labor during the era of Bill Clinton and over the last 40 years of neoliberalism. Additionally, after studying politics in undergrad, or geopolitics in undergrad rather, in countries like Venezuela and China, I was extremely surprised at the lack of international solidarity among the Western left and for international socialist experiments, and the willingness of American socialists to condemn socialist experiments abroad, as Bernie Sanders did on the debate stage in 2020, when Mayor Pete Buttigieg accused him of trying to bring Castro's Cuba to the United States. Let it also be noted that Mayor Pete supported Medicare for all himself until he started running for office and that insurance industry money started coming in. But rather than defend the successes of the Cuban healthcare system that have been brought about by Cuban socialism in the face of a crippling 70-year-long plus U.S. embargo, as Carlos and I have done in a series of papers and videos, Bernie Sanders decided to cower and promised that his healthcare system would look nothing like the authoritarian Cuban dictatorship, which had forced healthcare and reading upon its people. And this, to me, was a perfect example of what Carlos calls purity fetishism in the book, which prevents many self-described socialists in the West from supporting the struggles of our comrades abroad internationally. They allow one disagreement or one critique or one flaw, one failure of these foreign socialist experiments to
Sam, they just show their true colors as authoritarians when they do this. So let them do
entirely,
it,
disavow everything that our
do?
comrades have done internationally to construct socialism in the face of vicious and relentless imperialist aggression from the West. So until Carlos's book, I had really no way of explaining what I saw as strategic and ideological failures in the American left in a world that desperately needs a functional and revolutionary left. In this book, though, Carlos explains the historical roots of this purity fetishism. And he also shows that there's been a great deal of CIA infiltration and controlled opposition that has influenced and allowed the purity fetish to develop along the way. It's worth noting that this analysis would have been impossible without the incredible work of our friend Gabriel Rockhill, who's here today.
Looks like they've literally blocked everyone that was asking questions, so that's nice of them.
The compatible left.
I still want to know who's in charge of planning
Carlos
the economy.
shows us that when we stop expecting our comrades internationally and domestically to attain or maintain some kind of idealized perfection and realize that we're all flawed because we're all human beings, we can actually forge a path of unity, revolutionary
Disrespect the troops is probably someone that I banned, and they're really,
mean to abandon
by that
criticism
because
of
they
those
have a
within our
tiny
organizations
penis, and
socialist
just can't get
organizations
over the
abroad.
fact that they weren't
In
wanted
fact, it means
here.
the opposite. Abandoning the purity fetish allows us to recapture the ability to critique something without condemning it completely, to critique our comrades here at home and existing socialist experiments abroad, while still supporting them in their totality without canceling them entirely, so to speak. To forgo the purity fetish is not to forgo our principles, but rather quite the opposite, to recapture our core principles so that we can unify and rally people around them. Abandoning the purity fetish allows us to work with people and organizations who we may disagree with on some issues, but who hold our core values of class struggle and anti-imperialism.
The state would be in charge of planning the economy.
Is so important at a time like this when the sadistic imperialists who dominate Western society are pushing us ever closer to nuclear war, because there's never been a more important time for unity amongst those who oppose nuclear war and mutually assured destruction. I truly believe that this is an important book, and I'm deeply honored to have had any part in its publishing, and I'm deeply honored to be here today around so many people who I admire and respect. Carlos is one of my very best friends in the world, and I foresee that continuing until we're both in a nursing home someday, drinking Busch Lights or shots of Dr. Scotch while we discuss questions of theory, geopolitics,
Can we please at least get them good beer?
So I'm really proud of our institute for putting out such an important text, and even more proud of my friend for publishing such a text. So congratulations, Carlos.
That even
thanks for being one of the few academics whose heart remains with the working masses, along with all of our amazing friends and comrades who have joined us for this book launch today. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, brother. That was wonderful. Our next speaker is Gabriel Rockhill. Gabriel is a philosopher, cultural critic, and political theorist. He teaches at Villanova University and Greater Ford Prison.
Villanova!
He directs the critical theory workshop at the Sorbonne. His recent books include Counterhistory
the
of the Present,
as a critical theory workshop. You learn something new every day.
Interventions in Contemporary Thought in 2016, and Radical History and the Politics of Art from 2014. You may remember him from one of our more popular interviews we've had, where we spoke to him about the Frankfurt School and the creation of what we often refer to as the fake left. So here he is, Gabriel.
He definitely looks like a communist. Doesn't know how to use technology.
Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
There he is.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm back on. Sorry. So thank you so much, comrades. It's great to be here with you and join you for this important event. I would like to say a few kind of congratulatory remarks for Carlos, and then I have basically three kind of comments based on the book that inspired my thinking and conversations I've been having with organizers in my circles. So first and foremost, I think that the book is quite an important achievement at two levels, at least. One is that it manifests the collective ethos of everything that you've been doing at Midwestern Marx, which is quite an incredible undertaking. Very impressive that a group of people can kind of build on their own such a significant kind of collectively resourced institute that provides political education, brings people into the struggle,
they know.
breaks down complex ideas, makes them accessible.
Whatever, we can always make
you occupy a very important position, and I think that it's to the kind of the testament to.
That's a great question, Brandon.
Carlos, the ways in which he's been working with
other
people in this collective endeavor, not simply to fight intellectually against the purity fetish, but to build institutional power in order to struggle back against it. And that collectivity and that institution building should never be given short shrift, because it's one of the most important things that we can do. The book itself, though, is highly accessible. It's very well written. It is urgent insofar as it addresses one of the central problems facing the contemporary left, particularly within the Western imperialist world. It provides a resounding critique of the purity fetish, of controlled counter-hegemony, and other such things, while also advancing a positive project. So it's dialectical through and through, and that's one of its strengths. And it is also a kind of manifesto for the anti-imperialist left. And so I would encourage everyone to read the book. As Radhika pointed out, it is also relatively thin, so you can get through it. It is erudite without being bogged down in kind of academic referentiality.
Autumn!
Regarding the
Autumn is fine. Autumn, you are no longer welcome. We were very nice to you, Autumn. We were very, very nice. We had good conversation.
Meaning that the relationship between capitalism
and now you've shown your true colors in the chat, Autumn. So no longer welcome.
Systems, as if there would be
never, ever, ever trust socialists. Never trust them. They are liars.
That would be B.
They are liars and snakes, and will even when you're nice to them,
out of the
and you invite them in,
of capitalism in
they
its
always
decline.
do this shit.
Therefore,
every single. Thank you for making an example of yourself, Autumn. Thank you.
Problems that plague the history of capitalism, and it is tasked with doing somewhat the impossible. That is moving from a system that is based principally on profit over people to one in which people are put at the center of the socioeconomic system.
Autumn had a real opportunity to talk to people in our
favorite
chat.
Jokes that I've heard about the Socialist Project is the following. It says that socialism looks good on paper, but in reality, you just get invaded by the United States. This, of course, addresses the fact that we've never had a free socialist
Next time Autumn comes in my chat, I'm gonna be like, Autumn, why are you such a dumb cunt tattletale? And why did you lie? Because we are nothing but nice to you, Autumn. And then you showed your true socialist colors, like the socialist that you are.
This means that socialism, as it emerges in the very real world, has to deal with these very concrete material factors that it does not control because it is coming from the bottom up, meaning that its struggle is from the bottom up. Moreover, socialist countries need to develop by starting out from a point of position within the geopolitical world,
because Autumn would bully you.
Underdevelopment.
Autumn would put you against the wall.
And they have to do that without relying on many of the principal mechanisms of development under capitalism, such as colonialism and extreme forms of super exploitation. Moreover, socialists inherit all of the political and moral injustices of the capitalist system. Baked in racism, misogyny and gender oppression, all of the ideologies of the capitalist world. So we should actually
hear that? Baked in racism, gender oppression are all ideologies of the capitalist world. That's what he just said.
The dialectics of socialism is such that we should never expect a pure and perfect socialist system to kind of spring forth as if from the head of Zeus, but instead for it to be racked by a whole series of contradictions related to the fact that it is born out of a system of human degradation, which is the system of capitalism. What is absolutely remarkable, and again,
capitalism is a system of human degradation. This is a Villanova professor.
All of these odds, or against all of these odds, if you look at the quantifiable data that we currently have, and in fact, there's an interesting study that was done in 1986 that crunched all of the extant data from the World Bank, which couldn't be accused of being a communist sympathizer, and is arguably the largest body of data globally. This study found in 1986 that the physical quality of life index, which tracks such things as life expectancy, infant mortality, access to healthcare, access to education, and other such things, that the socialist countries had a more favorable performance than all capitalist countries at a similar level of development in 22 of 24 comparisons that were undertaken in the study by Shirley Saraceto and Howard Waitskin. So what's extraordinary is that even though socialism emerges in this dialectical tension with capitalism, it has nonetheless proven itself successful at the level of its material gains for working class people. In that regard, Carlos's book is an invitation for us to think very differently about the socialist project than the Western kind of fetishization of purity tends to make us think about it. That is, both recognizing the extreme difficulties of the socialist project and also supporting and celebrating the incredible, incredible gains that have been made for humanity, and for that matter, for planet Earth, given the environmental policies of the socialist countries, or at least in many instances. My two other comments have to do with a series of thoughts that were provoked in both reading Carlos's book and then discussing it with some people who are very close to me. The first is how the purity fetish relates to the longstanding criticisms of utopian socialism, and in particular those that were already
so scared. They want my
expressed by
Twitter
Marx and
account.
Engels. You can look at the Communist
I'm so
Manifesto,
scared.
or in The Poverty of Philosophy, where Marx explains, I have the quote here, but I won't read it in the interest of time. Marx explains that utopian socialism was largely a product of the lack of development of both the capitalist system and the state of class struggle at that point in time, meaning that the class struggle had not yet fully revealed to the working class the systemic workings of the capitalist ruling class. And therefore,
you guys really think that working class people are so stupid that they wouldn't know if they were oppressed?
Was actually a consequence.
I mean, I really think that these guys think that working class people are dumb.
Struggle. And so one of my questions for Carlos is, how would you understand the purity fetish in relationship to these kind of long-standing critiques of
course they're talking about
socialism,
doxing, they're socialists.
and in particular, those critiques
let them show their true authoritarian
the
colors.
Material forces that are operative behind these ideologies. I think this echoes some of the things that Radhika said, because I'd like to hear Carlos more on the central role played by the labor aristocracy in the history of the imperial left, and what kind of material forces are operative behind this, promotion of an idea that socialism has to be something that is structurally impossible. It has to be absolutely pure.
Guys, you can create different accounts to go into their chat.
By the history of capitalism.
I'm just suggesting
basically
that.
Immaterial. And ultimately, that's what
not
a lot
hard.
of them want.
Just create a different account.
Immaterial socialism, meaning one that
doesn't reference your account in the chat and go over there.
That tend to situate them on
that way they won't be able to snitch.
Of the labor structures globally.
Takes like 2 seconds.
And maintain their own material superiority in that regard. My last comment / question was also kind of provoked by a similar series of thoughts. And that is that if we take seriously the material role of the labor aristocracy in the imperial core for promoting certain forms
and say things
of
like, I'm really trying to focus on the book release.
Fetish, then what are we to make of, this is a comment recently made in a book called Communisme by Bruno Guig that I strongly recommend. He said that, drawing on Gramsci, that the struggle, the class struggle within the imperial core takes on a different form. And that is that since socialist revolutions have generally proven themselves to be more successful, obviously within the tricontinent, within the global south, and we have not had one within the global north or the imperial core, doesn't that mean that the class struggle in the imperial core takes on a slightly different form? And Guig draws on the distinction that Gramsci makes between a war of position and a war of maneuver, saying that within the imperial
Isn't it nice
core,
that the socialists are threatening
there
to
is
dox
such
me right now?
a deeply developed level
nice
of industrialized ignorance due to the control of the cultural apparatus and the kind of programmed ignorance through the schooling system and through the general kind of cultural institutions, if you will, of the Western world, that the Western left is faced with a very fundamental problem, and that is that the masses, for the most part, are profoundly uneducated about very basic things about how the world works.
They do think working class people are stupid.
Is that therefore what we need
the
in
Villanova
the
College professor thinks that
war
working
of
class
position,
people are
kind of trench
stupid. He
warfare,
just said it.
in which we focus principally on hegemonic struggle.
Isn't that
meaning
nice?
Struggle for
it's
political
almost like
education.
they want to
and that the
rile
war
up
of movement, the war in which you'd
because
actually
they
be able to
think
seize
they're going
power
to be
in
able to
a
rule
revolutionary
them.
manner, like has been done across the global south in certain instances, is, for the most part, I take it, that's at least what he's implicitly suggesting, not really on the table at this point in time. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't advocate for that, and it doesn't mean as well that, I think that someone like George Jackson is quite clear in this regard. If there is not a revolutionary situation, the onus is on us to produce and make that revolutionary situation. So Geeg's position, I take it, is that, well, to do that in the imperial core requires tasks that are slightly different, and that the fight against the purity fetish that Carlos is undertaking in this book is part of, I take it, a kind of larger struggle for political education and for wresting control away from the controlled counter-hegemony while building up a real counter-hegemony, like Midwestern Marx is trying to do, like the International Manifesto Group is trying to do, like the Critical Theory Workshop is trying to do, and like a lot of other organizations that we all work with are trying to do. And so these are my three kind of general thoughts on Carlos's book.
Why is
and a few questions for the discussion
disparaging a black trans woman in Yasmin?
And I'll finally close just by saying that it's extremely impressive and inspiring
is a cisgendered, straight white
young
man
scholar and vibrant mind
an oppressed
doing
black
such
trans woman like
important work
Yasmin.
at an early stage in his career. And I really look forward to continuing to collaborate with everyone at Midwestern Marx, learn more from you, and continue the struggle.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. That was amazing, and it got me very, very excited for the discussion to follow.
They are
touches on all kinds of stuff that we
no
talk about all the time at the Institute.
And no
Our next speaker, though, is Dr. Alan Freeman. Alan is a former principal economist with the Greater London Authority and is now a research affiliate at the University of Manitoba. Along with Radhika Desai, he's the co-editor of the Geopolitical Economy Research
Another socialist
He's also the co-editor of the Future of World Capitalism book series from Pluto Press and the Geopolitical Economy book series from Manchester University Press. He's a committee member of the Association for Heterodox Economics and vice chair of the World Association for Political Economy. He's a board member for Videopool Winnipeg and the Christopher Freeman Trust, and a former board member of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. Go ahead, Alan.
I have to say that's nearly all true, but I'm not a doctor. Just to get that clear off, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professor, a mistake everybody makes. I'm very pleased to be in this discussion for two reasons. One is that it's a wonderful book, but the second is that that we have at least three organizations whose origins are completely different, who are sitting around and actually talking. And I must say, in my experience of the pure left, this is a very rare event. You know, when we were, kind of involved in the little small struggle organizations and we met in a pub even, the first thing we do is start shouting at each other or singing songs in the bus to shout each other down. And this is a very important new stage, I think, in the evolution of the left, is actually to acknowledge the variety of different views that exist and discuss them out. So that's a very welcome event, it's a very welcome book. So I often say that I often prefer to discuss with people that I don't agree with to people I agree with, because if I discuss with people
too bad the people
with,
moderating your chat don't want to hear from people that don't agree with you.
So the reason for discussing with people you don't agree with is precisely to bring out difference, which is the purpose of dialectic. So I'm going to kind of,
none of you actually want to have discussions with people you disagree with. You just block them and don't answer their questions.
Which is a friendly criticism. I think it's too soft on the hard left. And I'll try and do a second thing, which I don't know if I can do in the time, is try and bring that into an evaluation of a very important contribution.
And then you threaten to dox people and you invite them to your house, and it's like, let's not pretend you're interested in discussion.
What the hell is the connection between those? So I'm going to read a few quotes out to you that may make you think more about, what did Plato actually say? The first is Alfred North Whitehead, who said, the safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. So everything you've been brought up on, that you've been told is the basis of Western democracy, owes most of what it's claims to its heroes, Plato and Socrates. What they forget is that both Plato and Socrates were irreconcilable enemies of democracy. Their position in Greek society arose after the defeat of the Athenian democracy at the hands in the Peloponnesian War, partly self-inflicted, but nevertheless a defeat, a tyranny of the Council of 30, who killed nearly 5% of the Athenian population, exiled many more. And they came to the conclusion after looking at this that the problem was democracy, and what you needed was a rule of the experts, a rule of the philosophers. And this rule had to be based on what Plato calls the noble lie. So your recipe for democracy is, first of all, you put experts in charge. You don't have anything to do with democracy, which Socrates and Plato both called the rule of the
Yasmin
ignorant.
is our
And second is you have to lie to them. That's the foundation of Western democracy. And the lie in Plato is justified in the following terms, that it's necessary in order to maintain social harmony. So it's a noble lie. And he tells a fictional tale known as the myth or parable of the metals. And this is the origin of the three social classes who compose his ideal, his pure republic, which never came into existence. It's the first, perhaps the first form of the purity fetish. And these are the gold, the silver, and the iron.
Beautiful,
And the gold,
Yasmin,
the silver,
just
and the iron are the
beautiful,
rulers.
Yasmin,
the workers,
queen,
the iron, and the guys in the middle who kind of, do the real business. Now, I want to put it to you that noble lie,
the black
and
trans
the rule
women
of the
win again,
philosophers are what we are actually getting from the far left. And I'll explain this in the following way. I have never met a member of the far left who is, and I count myself as a member of the far left, but of a far left purist organization that has justified supporting the provisional IRA in Marxist terms, or defending Saddam Hussein in Marxist terms, or defending the Iranian Revolution in Marxist terms, or siding with Russia in the aggression of NATO against it that provoked the current war in Marxist terms.
I know another guy who has a nose.
I've never heard
like
any justification for supporting socialist China in Marxist terms from any of these people. So what are these people? They are apologists for imperialism. Let's say that bluntly, let's say that loud, and let's say that clearly. And the way they do it is the same as the method of Plato, which is they construct this basically based on a confusion between form and essence. They construct an ideal form. Our ideal society has to be like this. And if it's not, it's wrong, it's impure, it's imperfect. But the doctrine of essence that was developed in the Hegelian Marxist tradition is something very different. It says, no, we don't look at what's ideal, we look at what lies behind what we see. Now, in both of them, they can appear quite similar because they make a contrast between what you see and what's really going on. So this gets distorted. I mean, I have a lovely quotation from Walras, the founder of modern economics. He says, a truth long ago demonstrated by the Platonic philosophy is that science does not study corporeal entities, but universals, of which these entities are manifestations. Corporeal entities come and go, but universals remain forever. Universals, their relations and their laws are the object of all scientific study. Now that, you could sort of square that with a kind of Hegelian narrative that underneath the reality, there lies underneath the observed superficial appearance, there lies something. But it's actually it's the opposite. And there's another beautiful quotation from Plato that illustrates this, because Plato argued that in order to stop people resorting to the sort of, the sin of looking at things as they really were, what you have to do is you have to have gods who are out of reach. So Plato actually invented the idea that the heavens are the abode of the gods, not Mount Olympus, but the heavens, because they're so far above us that you will never have people saying, I want to go there and see what's happening. Nowadays you did have it, but in Plato's time you didn't. And he justifies this in this wonderful phrase, which I've just sums it all up. No one can ever gain knowledge of any sensible object by gaping upwards, any more than by shutting his mouth and searching for it on the ground, because there can be no knowledge of sensible things. These intricate traceries in the sky are no doubt the loveliest and most perfect of material things, but still part of the visible world, and they therefore fall far short of the true realities, the real relative philosophies in the world of pure number and all perfect geometrical figures. So he says, not only can you not see things in the heavens, but there's no point in looking at the heavens because the real heaven is even beyond all that. It's completely inaccessible. Now, how does that work? The gold and the silver and the iron are with us today. The gold is the world created.
This guy
by
has descended into pure word salad. I have no idea what he's talking about.
Is an inferior form of that. Then we have the people who kind of go along with that, and they're the silver, the people who collaborate with that. And then you have the iron, who is everybody else. And everybody else is inferior. The fundamental way that Russians are described in the narrative of the West is, in the words of somebody like Josep Borrell, Europe is a garden and everywhere else is a jungle. That's naked racism. And when people in the Ukrainian government persistently say,
if we're honest about it, that is pretty racist.
Russians, not the Russian state, not the Russian government, but all Russians, that is a naked racism. And it's only accepted by people from pure Marxism because they use the pure Marxism to prove that Russia is just an imperialist country like any other.
Russia is just an imperialist country.
I'm going to say one more thing to bring that all back together. And this is the what you might call the classic origin of purity, which is the way in which Lenin defended the Russian Revolution against the charge of putschism. And he does that by reference to the Paris Commune. And from the notion of the Paris Commune as the dictatorship of the proletariat, or the prototype thereof, there comes the justification that he gives for the Soviet form of the state. I think I have no issue with that at all. But I think that subsequently what happened is people then, through the purity fetish in its earliest form, said, only if you have a Soviet republic do you have a pure democracy, do you have a real democracy, do you have something that fits the criteria of Marxism-Leninism. Now, what's wrong with that? Lenin never says that the Paris Commune proves that the ideal form of democracy is Soviet democracy. What he says, and this is essence as opposed to form, is that you cannot have a socialist revolution, you cannot go to a new form of society in which the working class rules without smashing the existing state. There are 100 different ways to smash the state. Sometimes it just dissolves itself and then you can have a quite peaceful process. Sometimes it fights back very, very hard and then you have to have a revolutionary war.
It's almost like they have to destabilize the system and then blame capitalism for that destabilization and then usher in their Marxist utopia.
That you don't quite understand.
Doesn't that sound like that?
But to impose on that the criterion that it has to meet the ideal form is to misunderstand the need to look at it from the standpoint of essence. That is, does it advance and defend the interests of working people, and does it retard and make more difficult the interests of the property owners? And I'll finish on a wonderful statement that was given in one of our webinars by an Iranian revolutionary, which is the analogy of the ice cream. He says, the way that revolutionaries approach revolutions is they say, I'm going to an ice cream van and I'm going to get offered a strawberry ice cream, a Neapolitan ice cream, a vanilla ice cream, and I'll choose the strawberry one.
Bingo.
He says, when you have a revolution, you don't get a choice. You get the damn ice cream and you take what you're given. And I think that notion that you deal with the reality, you look at the essence behind it, but you do not worship form, is
Midwestern Marx is getting so bothered. Relax, bro.
Of all the revolutionary currents that one finds, whether they call themselves Marxists or not, should be adopted and taken on board in a rich and broad dialogue with Bolivarianism, with the Iranian revolutionary tradition, with the emerging currents that we now see in the very fervent debates going on in Russia, with the socialist China and the Chinese Communist Party and the Vietnamese Communist Party. That's the kind of debate we need, a broad debate in which we all engage with each other on the basis of mutual respect without any precondition that we're going to say this is pure and if you don't say that, then we're actually just going to go into another shouting match. So that's me. I hope it was coherent at some level.
Well, you tried, emphasize. That's all you can do.
Incredibly coherent. Thank you very much, Alan. And thank you to everyone. These have been absolutely wonderful.
I would like to get into the Q&A, and I would like someone to explain to me who is in charge of planning the economy. That's all that I want. That is the only thing that I want. Who is in charge of planning the economy?
Those using a world outlook of a purity fetish. And he said, what these gentlemen lack is dialectics. And it always comes back to that, it seems.
I mean, I think this is a great question, James Jones. Why does it bother them so much?
To draw a line between form and essence. right, that the particular form a given thing takes on becomes its essential content for this. And I think that's a big problem. That might be a good way to start the conversation off, but there are 1,000 topics. We're not going to get to that just yet, though, because next is our sort of main event.
Maybe Carlos will
We're going to
answer
hear
who
from
plans the
Carlos
economy.
Garrido, who is a Cuban-American PhD student and instructor in philosophy at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. He has an MA in philosophy from that same institution. His
Who
research
is the state,
focuses
Johnny?
include Marxism,
Who?
Hegel, early 19th
The
century
elite?
American socialism,
Oh, it kind of
and
sounds like what we
socialism
have
with
now,
Chinese
doesn't it?
characteristics.
Not so much a
He's an
dictatorship of the
editor and
proletariat,
theorist at
is
the
it?
Midwestern Marx Institute, and editor for the Journal of American Socialist Studies. His popular writings have appeared in dozens of socialist magazines in various languages. As a political analyst with a focus on Latin American, especially Cuba, he has appeared in dozens of radio and video interviews around the world. He's the author of The Purity Fetish and the Crisis
It's
of
because
Western
he's
Marxism,
not a waiter in Havana.
and also
that he
edited
likes,
and
that he
introduced
likes Marxism
Marxism
because
and the
he doesn't
Dialectical
have to
Materialist
experience it.
Worldview, an anthology of classical Marxist texts on dialectical
He's the
materialism.
grandson of Castro.
He's also a very
Seriously?
good friend of mine. So everybody, get
Is that
ready
real?
to hear Carlos.
Wow.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure to hear all of your comments, and it's an honor to have you all here discussing the work, which has been very much shaped by the conversations I've had with everyone, both from the Institute and friends from the Institute, like Alan, Radhika, Gabriel, and Carlos Martinez was going to be here, but unfortunately couldn't make it as well. There's as well. But I have a not so short presentation here, and if I get long, please someone feel free to stop me. But in an 1875 letter to Wilhelm Brack, Marx would say that, quote, every step of real movement is more important than a dozen programs.
I got to get another.
This is the living
filter.
spirit of Marxist analysis. The emphasis is laid on
How
real
does it
struggles,
have to do with
on the
one of
forms
your
of social
speakers? Literally
formation
said
these
that
struggles
Midwestern
discover
Marx. It is
in their
directly related
overturning
to what one of
to
your
a lesser or
speakers
greater
said. Jesus
extent
Christ!
of the current state of affairs.
These people don't even
This
listen
is
to
the
their own
essence
talks.
of one of the
I
most
swear to
central
God.
ways in which Marx and Engels formulate what communism is. As they say in the German ideology, quote, communism is for us not a state of affairs which is to be established, an ideal to which reality will have to adjust itself. We call communism the real movement which abolishes the present state of things.
Really?
The
Reality
purity
has
fetish
to adjust
outlook,
to
which
communism?
permeates Western Marxism, is fundamentally
Really,
antagonistic
Carlos?
to this living and open Marxist Weltanschauung.
Wow, these people have no effing clue.
It holds
how
pure
things work.
static ideas as sacred, and it consistently rejects reality when such reality desecrates its pure ideals. This is the essence of the purity fetish outlook. It is an incessant passing of judgment grounded on a superficial assessment of whether reality measures up to pure ideas or not. Ideologically, it is deeply rooted in the traditions
This
of
is
Western
orange
philosophy,
and
dating
coconut.
back at least to the Eleatic school 500 years before Christ. In this school, thinkers like Parmenides and Zeno would put forth the view that truth is unchanging, one, and indivisible. To accept change, contradiction, and a heterogeneous understanding of totality would be to participate in the way of falsity and opinion. With the exceptions of Heraclitus, Hegel, and Marxism, this
For
form
people
of
new to my
thinking has
chat, there are
dominated
two
Western
rules.
thought
Don't be a
up to
dick,
our
no
day.
whining. If
And
you
in the
break
Western
either of those
Marxists,
rules, I'm
it
going to
takes
ban you.
various distinctive
Don't be a
forms
dick,
which,
no
while
whining.
sustaining the
I'm not
appearance of
asking too
Marxist
much.
analysis, is devoid completely of its revolutionary substance. The diagnosis Engels gave
Exactly,
reductive
Brucey.
Marxists in an 1890 letter to Conrad Schmidt applies fittingly to Western Marxists. What all these gentlemen lack is dialectics. When I first developed the concept of the purity fetish in October 2021, there was primarily one form through which I observed the purity fetish manifesting itself in Western Marxism. If there is a common thread found in the Western Marxist tradition, it is its unwavering rejection of socialist experiments, especially those led by communist parties. In the 1990s, following the overthrow of the Soviet Union, Michael Parenti had labeled them the adherents of pure socialism because they imagined, as he argued, quote, what socialism would be like in a world far better than this one, where no strong state structure or security force is required, where none of the value produced by workers needs to be expropriated to rebuild society and defend it from invasion and internal sabotage. Gabriel Rockhill, who is, of course, here with us, called their brand of critical theory ABS theory, as in anything but socialism. Their work in direct and indirect forms ultimately leads to an acceptance of the capitalist order, since socialism is judged to be far worse. The Western Marxists ignore the constant hybrid warfare under which the successful revolutionary projects have to construct socialism. They ignore the effects, especially for the experiments in the global South and East, that centuries of colonialism have had in keeping these areas poor and subjugated politically, economically, and culturally to the West. They ignore the colossal pressures, both historically inherited and contemporary, under which socialism is struggled for. And most importantly, they ignore how these pressures shape the parameters of embryonic socialist construction in these areas. As I argue in the book, socialism is not betrayed when encountering the external and internal pressures of imperialism and a national bourgeois class. It is forced to take more so-called authoritarian positions to protect the revolution. Socialism is not betrayed or transformed into state capitalism.
He just said socialism is forced to take authoritarian positions to protect the revolution.
When faced with a backwards economy, it takes the risk of tearing with its opposite and engages in a process of opening up to foreign capital to develop its productive forces. The authoritarian moment, or the moment of opening up to foreign capital, are not an annihilating negation of socialism, as the Western Marxists would have you believe, but the sublation of the idealistic conception of a pure socialism, especially in its earliest stages. A socialist Russia that had not taken the strategic retreat towards Lenin's new economic policy amidst the onslaught of the difficulties of war communism, which were forced upon them, of course, by the invasion of 15 countries after the revolution, including the UK, the US, Japan, Italy, and others, would not have survived. Likewise, without the so-called Stalinist collectivization, not only would the Soviet Union have remained unindustrialized and poor, but the Hitlerite forces would have been able to, as the West expected and hoped, trample over the Judeo-Bolshevik menace, destroying the first worker state and the notion that working class people could indeed rule themselves. Similarly, a less authoritarian treatment of the Batista goons after the Cuban Revolution would have opened the window for imperialism and national counter-revolutionary forces to overthrow the popular revolution. A less authoritarian Democratic People's Republic of Korea would not have survived the hybrid warfare waged on it by the U.S. empire and its NATO lackeys, who killed 20% of their population during the war and who have strangled their country with one of the most aggressive sanctions regimes in the world for the last 70 years. The authoritarianism that the Western Marxist purity fetish condemns is in every instance a necessary component to protect a revolution's sovereignty and socialist democracy. But since they treat authoritarianism or democracy abstractly and fail to ask democracy for what class and authoritarianism against which class, they are unable to see the necessary role authoritarianism against imperialism and against the national classes which collaborate with imperialism plays in securing a richer, broader, and more developed form of socialist democracy for the common people. The Western Marxist purity fetish makes them immune to seeing socialist construction as a process, one which will undoubtedly develop contradictions which will in time likely be overcome. A paradox arises in the Western Marxist sacrosanct
my scheme to listen
ideals.
to them.
Namely, while socialism is always too impure to obtain their support, these same Marxists won't hesitate to endorse directly or indirectly capitalist imperialism in its attempts to undermine both socialist experiments and non-socialist experiments that exist outside of the U.S.'s sphere of influence.
Thank you.
As Alan Freeman and Radhika Desai write in their recent dossier calling for a global anti-imperialist left, quote, it no longer makes sense to describe the current Western left as left, since they are, at their core, partisans of Western imperialist states. This so-called Marxism, this form of so-called Marxism, grounded on the purity fetish outlook, has been for decades an indispensable component of bourgeois hegemony.
I appreciate it.
Their theorists' role as left-wing delegitimizers of socialist and anti-imperialist states have earned them the part of being the tambourines enhancing the tune of mainstream media's war drums. They are the agents of a controlled counter-hegemony. The radical
as long as you admit that you're authoritarian,
that absorb
who want
any
to
and all
rule over
dissenting
other
attitudes
people,
in the masses into their
that's all I'm
compatible
asking.
left. leaving capitalist
Just
imperialism
tell us who you are.
fundamentally
You're
unchallenged.
authoritarians who want to
At its
rule.
core, the purity fetish Marxists
You
express
want
a
to be the
form
state.
of
You don't
what
want to
Georg
abolish the
Lukács
state.
called
You want
indirect
to be the state.
apologetics. Their superficial repudiation of capitalism, when conjoined
You
with
don't
their
want to free the
rejection of real
worker. You don't want to
socialism,
empower the
is one of the most
proletariat.
effective ways
You
of
want to
affirming the
rule
dominant
them.
capitalist mode of life. They accept, at least in practice, Churchill's dictum about capitalism being the worst system except for all the other ones. For them, bourgeois liberal democracy is, like the world that Leibniz's God has created, the best of all possible worlds. This makes it the ideal form of controlled opposition, an opposition that buys fully into Thatcher's Tina, there is no alternative, and hence will never substantially oppose the existing order, for it considers the alternatives far worse. As Ketty Shukroff describes it, their key function is in the radicalization of the impossibility of exit. As the general crisis of capital are intensified by what John Bellamy Foster has called the two forms of exterminism, nuclear war, and the planetary
fake,
ecological
Yasmin?
Emergency, it becomes indispensable for Marxists to struggle against this purity fetish
And now he's
outlook.
gone.
It is a worldview which not only
Thank you for your
obstructs the
service.
acquisition of truth, but vacillates from simply being revolutionary futile to being an indispensable material and ideological force for the conservation of the dominant order. In the US, the purity fetish takes an additional two forms, which I would like to briefly bring up. In each case, again, it prevents the acquisition of truth and the development of a revolutionary movement. There is a strong current on the left, both in social democrat and in communist spaces, that view the Trump voting part of the working class as constituting a fascist threat. These workers are seen as a contaminated basket of deplorables, in the words of Comrade Clinton, who are unfit to be organized.
Clinton.
As someone who has spent their whole organizing life in the Midwest, the area of the country most densely populated with pro-Trump workers, these sentiments are far from true. But even if they were, even if this was the most backward part of the working class, what is the point of communists if not precisely to lift the consciousness of workers, regardless of their ideological starting point? Would we not just be preaching to the choir if we expect the working class to already meet all the pure standards of our enlightened social consciousness? The task of communists is to organize along class lines, not ideological lines, and to raise the consciousness of workers, regardless of their ideological standing, to socialist class consciousness.
Thank you, Bonnie.
As Gramsci would put it, the task of communists is to find the kernels in the masses' incoherent worldview, which could be re-articulated towards socialism.
The masses' incoherent
Patronizing
worldview.
attitude towards
They
the masses
think the workers
makes
are
this task
stupid.
impossible. One must learn from the masses in order to guide them towards socialism. The educators, as Marx noted, must themselves be educated. If the purity fetish leads one to rejecting, if the purity fetish leads some to reject organizing the 40 or so % of workers which voted for Trump, this paralyzes the class struggle at a time when conditions couldn't be riper for its development. If this is true of those on the ultra left who cancel the Trump part of the working class because it fails to meet their pure standards of what enlightened social consciousness workers
This is
must
terrifying,
have
and we're
going to
talk about why when they're
it
done.
couldn't be more true of those fringe elements which see all non-indigenous workers as settlers. The second unique form the purity fetish takes in the American Marxists can be found in their assessment of their national past. The dialectical worldview, both in Hegel and in Marxism, rejects the idea of an unchanging, pure, ahistorical universal, and instead urges that universals are necessarily tied to historically conditioned concrete particulars. Universals are always concrete, that is, they take their form through the particular. What does this tell us about socialism? Well, simply that there's no such thing as abstract socialism. Socialism is a universal which cannot exist unless concretized through the particular. In every country it has taken root in, socialism has had to adapt itself to the unique characteristics of the peoples that have waged and won the struggle for political power. In China, this has taken the form of socialism with Chinese characteristics. In Cuba, this has meant incorporating José Martí and the anti-colonial traditions into socialist construction. In Venezuela, this has taken the form of Bolivarian socialism. In the plurinational state of Bolivia, this has taken the form of combining Marxism with the indigenous communist traditions which have been around for centuries. In the continent of Africa, this has taken the form of Pan-African socialism, and so on. In each case, the struggle has been, as Georgy Dimitrov had already noted in 1935, national in form and socialist in content. In various parts of the US left, the purity fetish outlook has obscured this historical lesson and made rampant the phenomenon which Dimitrov called national nihilism. our people's history is reduced to slavery, settler colonialism, imperialism, and all the evils of capital and its state. In doing so, they reject drawing from their national past to give form to socialist content. Far from the progressivism they see in this, what this actually depicts is a liberal-tinted American exceptionalism, which thinks that the struggle for socialism in the US will itself not have to follow this concrete universal tendency seen around the world, where socialism functions as the content which takes form, that is, concretizes, according to the unique circumstances in which it is being developed. This has prevented the US left from genuinely learning from its progressive history and connecting with its people. It makes impossible the task of re-articulating the kernels of progressive thought in our people's common sense towards socialism. It prevents the American Marxists from understanding their national past dialectically as a social totality in constant movement propelled by its imminent objective contradictions. Because our national past is impure, the purity fetish Marxists make the task of learning from our progressive struggles, from Du Bois to Douglas and Winston, impossible. These figures and the movements they were attached to are held to be, in a form of left-wing McCarthyism, anti-American. The anti-communist myth we fought against last century has been accepted in this one, namely that America and the American people are on one side and socialism on the other, with an unbridgeable gap in the middle. The acceptance of this McCarthyite nonsense has been thanks to the development of the purity fetish within a greatly debilitated communist movement that was left wandering in the dark after the overthrow of the Soviet Union. But times have changed, and so can we. Today, as younger generations of Americans face, for the first time in history, living standards worse than their parents, as 60,000 people continue to die a year because they do not have health insurance, as 60% of Americans are a lost paycheck away from joining the 600,000 homeless wandering around in a country with 33 times as many homes as many empty homes as homeless people, as 34 million Americans, including 1 in 8 children, experience hunger in a country which throws away 40% of its food supply, as stagnant wages and inflation have working class Americans struggling to make ends meet, as failed proxy wars and global de-dollarization kicks in, demonstrating with undoubtable clarity the moribund character of US capitalist imperialism, as, in short, it becomes clear that neither the people nor the ruling class can continue in the old way, signifying the objective revolutionary conditions of our historical moment. The purity fetish today stands as the primary barrier preventing the development of the subjective conditions for a revolutionary movement. We must overcome the purity fetish outlook before it obliterates our ability to overthrow, in a timely manner, our demented ruling class that is pushing the world to the precipice of nuclear Armageddon in the name of sustaining their global hegemony. These enemies of humanity are wobbling, but as Lenin said, they will never fall without being toppled over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, brother. That was amazing. We're going to go over to sort of an open discussion now. I'd like to kick it off.
It was amazing how many times he said that they're going to be authoritarian to enforce their revolution.
So incredibly
important. I thought that was really impressive.
In his remarks, he mentioned that the purity fetish left makes it impossible to organize a revolutionary movement.
Well, that's because I wasn't organizing people to sabotage you, Midwestern Marx. In fact, I blatantly told them not to. Repeatedly masses, at the beginning of the stream.
Abstract
it's kind of like you guys don't listen and aren't interested in the truth.
Based on who has acceptable ideas.
Jesus.
But wherever they may be, and in meeting them where they may be, in this way, be able to bring them forward and create something new as our new era sort of develops. Anyone who wants to, just jump in whenever you'd like. You can unmute yourselves. Or we can do it. It's up to you.
I'll jump in and just say, I don't think one builds movements. I think movements build themselves. And one of the characteristics of the far left purity movements that I've been associated with is the entire emphasis on what we have to do to build the movement. And that actually is a form of the Platonic notion of the rule of the philosophers, that we know what's true and we're going to tell you masses what. What we have to do is look at the historical reality of what the masses are doing and analyze what the essence of that is. And I'll give you a couple of examples of this from British experience. I mean, the whole far left
excellent, Beth. That's what happens when you keep coming back to Socialism Saturday. You start to learn to speak socialist.
Let's just say the largest organization in GB was going to build a new party, and they took on a certain mass character at a certain point in time. Then along came a character you may have heard of in the 1980s called Tony Benn. Tony Benn was a very radical left Labour who had moved from quite right-wing positions, not fascist positions, but, you know, conventional establishment positions, to endorsing workers' control, workers' democracy, denouncing the colonial tradition.
Oh, they're live. They're live, and they are deeply, deeply unhappy about
becoming
this.
The deputy leader of the Labour Party.
They're screaming inside.
What was the content of Benninism? It was an old tradition in British politics, going back to John Wilkes, of asserting democracy. And this was particularly important in the historic conditions of Britain, because I don't know if you are aware of this, the British state is the least democratic imperialist state in the world. And that's saying something for people from the USA, but it is fundamentally a colonial relic. It's run by, I mean, the mere fact that you can celebrate the election of Charles III, given that you executed Charles I, just tells you what it's all about, right? In fact, in Cuba, I remember meeting a guy in the street when I was there in 1972, and this guy just
Thank you, VT Num. I appreciate it. Yay, capitalism.
At least we got rid of our monarch. You know, you still have that was a proletarian understanding that has lived with me ever since. Then along comes Corbyn. Now, there are many problems with Corbyn, and
thank you, emphasize.
I think there were mistakes that were made by the Corbyn team, not necessarily by Corbyn. But nevertheless, you have to understand the content of the Corbynist movement to understand what's going on. Now, on the other hand, you can have mass movements that are profoundly reactionary in character, and this may be a source of dispute, which is that I think, for example, the truckers' convoy that we encountered in Canada, I don't know about the experience in the US, I don't want to lecture, but it had a profoundly reactionary character, and that was unalterable. But one has to get into discourse with people who are taken in by it. But with the movement itself,
technical difficulties. Oh no!
Brutal movement that go, you know, originally with the convoy that started in the Midwest and specifically diverted itself to join to smash a picket line on the only unionized oil refinery in Alberta. Right, as it's now working class movement. So one has to distinguish between movements and organizations, and one has to look at what is the potential and the origin of each movement as it emerges. That's not a purity line. That's just saying one has to be concrete. You know, with Hitler, there was nothing you could do except smash it. That's what Nazism was, and that's what Nazism is today. There's nothing you can do but fight it. In the course of fighting it, people will come over. People will see that you're right. The battle between
I'll be at Porkfest. I'm speaking on the main stage on Tuesday, right after the welcome. I'll be there all week.
And we never close our doors.
I'm
to
selling
anybody.
some of my merch there too.
Never. If people want to cross and say we were wrong, fine. We need you in our army. But in my opinion, that's what the left should really.
So looking forward to Porkfest. Thank you for the super chat.
At movements as they emerge, and we should debate in a pluralistic way amongst ourselves. Well, what is the real nature of this movement? And we can have that debate without rancor, without purism, particularly if we rid ourselves of the purity fetish. We're not judging the movement, we're analyzing it. So
I mean, these guys are actually making really good points about what they need to do to drive their movement, and I really hope everyone is listening to this. We'll talk about it when their presentation
the provisional
is over.
IRA is another.
The fact that they figured this out is actually terrifying. Said, I figured this out 2 years ago IRA, in regards to them.
Guys. But the provisional IRA got one thing right, which is you have to stand up for Irish national independence. And they gradually dropped all the reactionary elements of the old tradition of Sinn Féinism. No, not Sinn Féinism, of the Irish liberation struggle. I wouldn't blame Sinn Féin for it, but you know, there were reactionary elements in that mass movement, and they gradually got rid of them, and they educated themselves, and they educated the members, and they educated the public. And Ireland passed
nuclear. Did you get banned?
Abortion laws better than America right now. Okay, as a result of the struggle of the provisional IRA. So you don't judge things by their cover; you judge things by what's in the tin.
I think the provisional IRA is a really good study of this. because, like you say, it did have a lot of reactionary elements in it, but it was able to overcome these in a lot of ways.
Got a bingo. Congrats,
and
Akshay.
It reminds me a lot of a sort of new labeling that's come up among the purity fetish left, that anything that isn't a sort of historical and national nihilistic position is labeled a pat soc. It's their new term, meaning patriotic socialist, as if these socialism can't be inherently patriotic as it is in China, right? And so it's their way of dismissing anything in this new form that embraces the revolutionary tradition of the USA. Because they see things through this purity fetish outlook, they have this one-sided view of the US that can only see, for example, Jim Crow, rather than the entire thing, which is Jim Crow as well as the Black freedom struggle, right? As a contradiction that is being overcome. And I think getting over that sort of stuff, especially with the power that the branding
These are not anarchists. They might think that they're anarchists, but they're not really anarchists. Important. They still believe in a state. Anarchists do not believe in a state. They do believe in a state, and they think stupidly that they're going to run it. These are not anarchists.
Alan made that's connected to the critique which you made, and I think it's a good, fair critique that I was, in terms of citation, at least, a bit soft on the hard left. I think in terms of the ideas, I was tackling the ideas, but sometimes not pointing out directly who it was that I was talking to. In part, those are difficulties that arise thanks to the nature of the organizations that we are in, and you know,
exactly. Anarchists believe in voluntary association, not state force.
That direct engagement.
That's right.
And calling out the who it is that we're talking about.
And this guy's already said they're authoritarian.
I do see that
they're not anarchists.
What's in the Marxist-Leninist tradition, what it's been labeled,
they do have very nice capitalist bookshelves,
as ultra-leftism and as right opportunism. I see them in the U.S. Consistently overlapping in their assessment of politics, of geopolitics, of national politics, and I see that overlap as grounded in the purity fetish outlook. So I do think that the part of the problem that's tied to not supporting China, it's done. I think with the case of China, something that's done. You can visibly see how the social democrats and the ultra left align in their rejection of China for various reasons. The ultra left because China's not.
Don't pretend you know what libertarianism is, bro.
Economy, centrally planned.
Don't pretend. Don't front.
Economy, no markets, and the SOC Dems because they accept the BS narratives, the atrocity propaganda about Uyghur genocide and all this sort of hilariously false and baseless things. But I think both of those tendencies feed off of each other.
They think the Uyghur genocide is propaganda. That's fascinating.
A sort of whole that represents what a controlled.
The Uyghur genocide is okay when China's doing it because they love China.
In the U.S. As far as the movements, I think part of the difficulty is that we have had a good amount of movements, at least in the last 2 decades in the U.S. We had the movement against the war in Iraq. We had the Occupy Wall Street movement, the Bernie movement to a certain extent. It was both tied to the campaign and somewhat separate to it. You still have groups that are pushing for Medicare for all and getting a lot of people to the streets. The George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter movement, it got, I believe the estimates are anywhere from 25 to 35 million people on the streets, which is the largest movement that we've had in the U.S. Now you have movements erupting after, basically the lynching of Jordan Neely. And, we have shown a propensity to, the masses have shown a propensity to be willing to throw themselves out into the street and to protest. And I think that part of the problem here is that this movement, which shows it's I think a component in seeing how the objective revolutionary conditions are here. This movement is somewhat blind. It needs ideological clarity. It needs a systematic analysis of why it is that these particular things that they see, what is it rooted in, and how can you challenge it? And it needs a vanguard organization. And a vanguard organization, of course, doesn't just become one when it says it is one. It needs to develop organically out of that. And I think part of what, the project of developing the purity fetish is trying to see, maybe correctly, maybe incorrectly, what are the conditions which are preventing the development
they turned on
that
subscribers only mode in
type
the
of
chat.
organization that can grab at a time where the conditions, the objective
Wow.
conditions for revolution are so ripe, that can grab a people which have shown themselves to be capable of
I
protesting
actively told them not to. So
against the
rewind to the
established
beginning of the
order,
stream,
and
bro.
that
I told
lack
them not to. You guys were the
ideological
ones egging them
guidance.
on and saying
And
like being
perhaps it
dicks and
connected
blocking
to
them for asking
one
questions.
of the questions that
I told
Gabriel
them not
brought
to.
up,
But I'm a libertarian.
concerning
I
the war
don't
of
control
positions.
people.
I think that is one of the central
They're adults.
area.
They can do what they
That's
want.
the war that we have to wage. It. We can't have
A nice try,
anything
bro.
near to a war of
Nice
maneuvers
try.
in the current ideological
If you're gonna stick around
state
here,
that
don't
we're
be a
in.
dick. No
And
whining.
that's going to require understanding the American people,
Yeah,
learning from
he's
them.
just pissed because
And that's not
Yasmin got him
just like
blocked.
a task that you can do in one place and boom, you're set to go. There's so many regional differences. I've had
That's
to
why
travel
Dominic's
from
upset.
the
'Cause
south to the
Yasmin got him
Midwest, and
blocked.
you feel the regional differences, the different sorts of
Boo-hoo.
associations that people have to various parts of the American tradition. And it's going to take a sort of a very concrete and immediate understanding of people's communities, of their people, and how from the common sense, not just understanding, but feelings, desires, aesthetic sensibilities of those people, how can you get kernels and then re-articulate those towards socialism? I think that's the essence of the war of positions. When you go to teach someone about something, you have to begin by where they are already at, and from where they're at, you take them to where you want them to go. And you can't do that if you a priori reject where they're at before engaging with them and seeing what potential they have to go to where we need them to go, which is socialism.
Yeah, if I may just come in there, what I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that were triggered by the last round of comments. When you say you have to begin where people are at, I mean, you're so absolutely right. And one of the dead giveaways of the kind of top-down left that sort of has, where the intellectual and where the brains and numbers, as the Fabians used to put it, are separated, is all the talk about consciousness raising.
Never listen to any libertarian that calls himself a Fabian. They're lying. They're
Everybody in the United
socialists.
States reads Capital. Only then you'll get revolution. Reads and understands. This is not how it's going to happen. If that's what you're waiting for, that's not. So the real movement towards socialism will inevitably be, as you rightly point out, relatively, it will not emerge in any kind of pure form. The second thing I wanted to say is, this is, when Noah was talking about, how anything that doesn't resemble, does not conform to the purity fetish view is then called patsock or something else disparagingly. That reminded me that, of course there is the purity fetish, and I completely agree with you. But there is also, the purity fetish, let's say, has a certain core, a certain kernel, but around it also is padded a heck of a lot of other things about which there is a sort of purity fetish. And one of them is the ideology of globalization. And that this is also connected with something I've been sort of arguing for some time, which is that, if you look at some of the worst tendencies of the left that you've been criticizing as the purity fetish, you'll see that they take on an accentuated form in the neoliberal period. And in many ways, the purity fetish and associated malaises of the left are actually part of the neoliberalization of the left. Which is why, for example, you get on the left an absolute rejection of any notion of planning. Oh, it's too centralist. You get an absolute rejection of any notion of party. No, only social movements will do so. It's the combination of what I've elsewhere called the combination of Proudhonist economics and network politics. So small is beautiful economics and network politics, rather than planning and party, which is what will be absolutely central. I mean, you've got to take Marx seriously on this.
She's arguing for a centralized approach to the revolution rather than a decentralized approach, which, from an authoritarian perspective, is smart. But it also proves they're authoritarian.
The thing to which purity,
and not anarchists at all.
Purity is, people worry so much, is often called internationalism, but it's actually globalization. That is to say, because internationalism still understands the world to be divided into different nations. But it's a certain globalist attitude about revolution, that somehow revolution is going to happen in one loud thunderclap all over the world. And the actual reality of revolutions taking place in different societies, proceeding at different paces towards some kind of ever more developed socialism, is completely rejected. So, China or Russia is rejected. Socialism in one country, we can't have that. But all socialism is going to have to begin in some or the other single country, and then proceed forward from that. And
You're
so what
not
I'm also
anarchist.
Trying to say is that there is a certain,
you have said several times you believe in a state,
which fails
you are
to
not
understand
anarchist.
the centrality of nation states in the world that capitalism has created. Just as capitalism has created capitalist classes and working classes, so it has created imperialist nations and imperialized nations. And inevitably, as a consequence, it has created the struggle of nations, to liberate themselves and so on. Some, of course, with greater effectiveness and greater effort than others. But nevertheless, this struggle is there in a latent form everywhere, which is partly why I think we're now looking at a period in which even in countries which are not remotely socialist, you see greater and greater unwillingness as well as inability of even some of the most right-wing governments to go along with what the imperialist West demands of them. Now, I'm not endorsing these governments. I'm the foremost critic, for example, of what is essentially a fascist government in India. But nevertheless, I think it's important to remember that Modi can't, much as he would love to, can't side with the United States. And I think that those are the sorts of things, objective realities we have to recognize. And that's why it is very important also to put at the center of our understanding of what socialism will consist of some conception of the developmental state. Because the fact of the matter is, as we've already pointed out, various people have pointed out, socialism has not occurred. I think, Gabriel, you pointed out most clearly, socialism has not occurred in first world countries. It has always occurred in third world countries. What does that mean? It means that in these countries, they have not just had the luxury of looking after redistribution in an already rich country. They have had to build up the productive forces from a point of great setback created by colonialism and imperialism. So they have, and they have had to do it. So three things. It's great setback, so they have to overcome that setback. Number two, they have to do it without the privilege of imperialism, which is at the foundation of the development of the first world countries. And thirdly, they have to do it against the unremitting resistance of the imperialist countries. So in all of these ways, the centrality of nations, and therefore a progressive understanding of nationalism not as chauvinism, nationalism as a commitment to developing your society and doing so in mutually beneficial relations and solidaristic relations with the struggles of other people. Such a nationalism has existed and it continues to exist in many parts of the world, and that's what you have to look for. One final point. In the post-Second World War period, it pleased the first world countries particularly to always to denigrate, to criticize the very notion of nationalism as though it was a bad thing, which is
their chat is so much more boring without us in it. Can we just admit that?
Somehow being a patriot is not bad.
Like, they don't know what to do with themselves.
A nationalist is bad because inevitably it is chauvinist. And this was precisely because what the West wanted to do was to recreate the imperial world in which
because they look for dumb
role,
people,
in which subject countries simply accept their lot. And in third world countries, nationalism was very important. It was the, it was what drove these people to liberate themselves to some extent or another. And I think that this disdain for nationalism has to be overcome, as I say, not in some kind of a simple-minded endorsement of all forms of nationalism, but by distinguishing between what I once called developmental nationalism and chauvinistic right-wing forms of what I then call cultural nationalism. Not the best labels, but I think they distinguish between a nationalism that wishes to build a society on, build a society, productive society, egalitarian society, and a nationalism which, in the name of some glorious past, is creating new hierarchies and inequalities in society.
I'm just going to be real quick. I think what you're saying, Radhika, is brilliant, and it dovetails really nicely into your own work on the materiality of nations. And I think this is a lot of what the purity fetishists can't really see, is the materiality
go over and ask
of
them.
the American people having become more and more the American people as time has gone on. Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't French. He wasn't Argentinian. He was American. And just as the, decaying moribund side of America was there, so was he. And this makes us more and more ourselves. What they sort of fall into is what the Soviets used to call rootless or hollow cosmopolitanism, right? And this belief that it's all just in the abstract and you are what you think you are, which is, while they believe they're being internationalist, like you said, what they're really doing is embodying the globalized form of capitalism. And that's an issue. And it's an issue that Lenin and Stalin both addressed a very, very long time ago. That's all.
I might jump in quickly with some additional thoughts, because I agree very much with Radhika and some of the other points that have been raised, that there's an anti-party, anti-state ideology that has really saturated a lot of the Western left.
Look at that capitalist super chat.
And it's ultimately in opposition to
how
organization
dare they monetize
in any kind of structural form whatsoever. A lot of this, of course, has affected the U.S. context quite extensively due to the widespread, rampant individualism and libertarian ideology that makes it even worse than the former imperial powers.
Individualism and libertarianism? Oh my word, clutch your pearls.
And so overcoming that opposition to organizational structures in general is extremely important. But part of the problem in doing that is the history of various parties and organizations within the imperial core that have had a very long and deep history of social chauvinism, of supporting colonialism, supporting imperialism,
social chauvinism.
And so one of the things that I think that we need to grapple with, both intellectually and practically, is the fact that within the imperial core, we are in a moment of communist reconstruction. The parties of the past have, we'd have to go through all the details in this, but there have been many mistakes that have been made. There has been, problems with right opportunism. There have been a whole series of issues with these parties. Some of them are attempting to internally reform. Other opportunities have also emerged with relatively recent parties that are breaking with the more kind of reformist and at times opportunistic orientation of some of the earlier socialist parties. This process of socialist reconstruction is incredibly important, because I couldn't agree more with Carlos that what we have in the US context is the enormous force of an extremely oppressed, very exploited working class, while at the same time we have an industrialized attack on any rudder that would ever be given to that working class. Meaning the ship is there, the ship is built, and what the US national security state and other powers constantly do is try to make sure that the ship is just lost at sea and a movement comes and a movement goes, but at the end of the day, we can't actually make real gains for working class people. And so building that rudder in a way that obviously is in continuity with a lot of the deep history of vanguardism, but also learns from that history in ways that mistakes are identified, problems are addressed, etc. And the final thing that I'll say on this front is that in the imperial core, one of
they mean it as an insult.
kind of
They think you're right-wing
lodestars,
reactionary.
Is that the right word?
Because they
one
think
of the
everyone's a right-wing
guiding
fascist,
kind of beacons
essentially.
of our politics.
It's like when
should
the people in
always be
Gab call us
anti-imperialist,
Jews.
right?
Same thing.
If you're not already
Murphy
in
Spool.
a socialist party or socialist organization, if you're listening to this with a bit of trepidation regarding some of what the speakers are saying, at an absolute minimum, be an anti-imperialist. Support the struggle of the most oppressed and most exploited peoples of the world who are in the tricontinent, who have been under the jackboot of fascist-style imperialism for decades and centuries. It's a human internationalist project
not
and an
afraid of you
environmental
Midwestern
project
Marx
we're
at
involved
all.
in, and we have to organize collectively. We have to organize internationally.
I just want to jump in if I can. And Noah, tell me if can I have another couple of minutes? Because there's a key.
Absolutely not. No, never.
Because it is
No,
a
go ahead.
giant waste
You'll do
of
it
my
anyway. I'm
time.
going to disobey. So
And my
Carlos let
energy.
slip a phrase that I am profoundly disturbed by. As you may gather, I enjoy controversy. So he used the word vanguard organization. I don't like that term. And I'll tell you why. Just like mass movements, vanguards organize themselves. The task is not to set up, and this is part of the purity tradition of the far left, is you set up an organization, say, here we are, guys, we're perfect, or maybe we're imperfect, but we're here, come and join us. I just don't think in any way, at any time in history, that's the way I can't think of any revolutionary movement that's ever been formed in that way. Not even in Cuba. I mean, in Cuba, all the guys said is we're going to fight until we've got rid of Batista. They didn't.
I'll give him that.
You can come and join our army or not, but the general strike was a crucial element of the uprising of the masses that was inspired entirely separately from the Castroist movement, and then they came together afterwards. Now, we were told recently, and you guys can tell me if this is not true or true, but I'm told that a movement of young union organizers, including organizers of the Amazon workers, recently visited Cuba. Now, I would say that that is a vanguard forming itself.
What?
That's a vanguard forming itself.
Did he just say
Nobody told
Amazon
them to do
workers
it.
had
And the task of the
Cuba?
left is to go and learn from those people.
Did I hear that
not
right?
To go and preach to them. And, if there's any message that I would have, it's not come and join our organization, but why don't you guys organize yourselves? Why don't you guys, you are in a position to create a new pole. It may fail, it may succeed, but you're in a position. So try wherever people are at the forefront of struggle, organize. That was the old message of the union movement. Don't mourn, organize. And that to me is the way you're going to get a mass movement. And I also think there's a very fundamental thing that we learned in my organization in Britain early on, which is that consciousness doesn't change because people are told things.
Organizers of Amazon workers?
Changes because people go through experiences.
Yo.
And the biggest experiences are experiences that touch millions of people. I think that the George Floyd
Amazon
movement,
union organizers visited Cuba.
Don't understand it.
Isn't that something?
They just think it's a manifestation of wokeism.
You learn something new every
day. It was a crucial moment in the historical consciousness.
Amazon is learning from Cuba
of the American working class, because it was the first time I've seen since 1968, and even then it was on a much smaller scale, white kids go out on the streets and say, we have more in common with black workers than we have with our bosses. And up until then, it was always like, we're superior. That's why Kansas votes the wrong way. It's because people feel I may be trash, I may be useless, but I'm superior.
Is Midwestern Marx the guy who sounds like he smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day? Is that the same guy?
Christ,
because
the same. Now,
I guess I'll be interested to hear his response to me if he can.
People, things like that live on.
Get it out.
And you have to. People go off and do weird things, but also there's a historical consciousness there. So I think this whole issue of how a vanguard forms.
I am an anarcho-capitalist.
Come into being.
I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I think both are crazy.
Study. And I would just say one further thing, that the reason that Radhika and I wrote the document which we submitted to the Valdai Club about the need for an anti-imperialist left were 2 reasons. One was we wanted to define what the left really was and say that there's a profound misunderstanding of what the left is, that thinks that social democratic left is left. It's not left. It's imperialist reactionary crap.
I know. You guys think social
the Democratic Party is no way part of the left.
And you're wrong.
Bernie Sanders is no way part of the left. Right? Ocasio is no way part of the left, because if you say I'm left wing for my own people, but I'll crap on everybody else. That's not pro-working class, right? It's anti-working class.
That guy's now the best.
But, the crucial thing we wanted to say, as well as you don't understand what the left is,
Bernie Sanders is not a part of the left.
You call
we don't own him. We don't claim him.
You know, I think the bad things that have been thrown at wokeism are just awful because they don't understand what George Floyd was about, and they don't understand the point that Malcolm X got.
What was it about, Alan?
This is where wokeism began. The racism that is directed against all minorities, particularly in England, we
you guys
black
banned
people,
a black trans woman like 4 times in your chat.
Origin,
you want to talk to me about racism? You're a white man that banned
and your
a black
sisters
trans
and brothers
woman.
are those who lived in the countries oppressed by imperialism. That's the highest stage of consciousness that has been
You're not
reached
only
in the American
racist, but
class,
also
is the
transphobic.
of the non-white peoples of America. And I think that, with all due respect to having respect for the patriots, I would say the first thing you have to have respect for is the people who led the real struggles of working people in the United States. And there's a tradition that goes back. People, black people took part in the Tea Parties and so on, but they were a tiny minority. And the whole history of the communist movement is one in which the people who are the most oppressed, and who are particularly doubly and trebly oppressed, women, gay people,
they just
people
don't
who
respect
just
black
suffered
trans
every
women.
kind of oppression that there could possibly be. So the only way I can liberate myself is in alliance with everybody else who's oppressed. So the meaning of vanguard to me is not somebody who's in an organization. It's somebody who's reached a profound realization of the condition they find themselves in that leads them to act in a different way.
I think those are wonderful comments, and I don't think that the two things are mutually exclusive. And you mentioned Chris Smalls and the Amazon organizers. We had a stream which landed on May Day, where we broke down how it was that Chris Smalls, in declaring himself a revolutionary and learning from Cuba and being shaped by this milieu of communists, how he's breaking with the traditions of somewhat labor aristocratic trade unionism, which have dominated in the U.S. But part of the reason why that effort succeeded, part of what I would call the yeast that allowed some of it to erupt in Amazon in the Staten Island warehouse, was because there was communist salters there from the Communist Party and some from PSL. Justine Medina, she's one that's been interviewed a few times about it. These are communist organizations that go in through salting and help these working people just push further something that they already want, right? So I'm fully on board with the idea that this whole thing, you make a new party, we're the vanguard. It's very PMC, and it's grounded, as Radhika mentioned, it's very loosey-goosey cosmopolitanism. And we definitely have to be against that. But I do think that that vanguard role arises somewhat organically.
I don't care.
You need organizational structures. You need organizational structures that.
I disagree with that at all. You need organizations. The question is how they're created.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the question that we have now. Like, many people in the U.S. are asking themselves, like, do we attach ourselves to
you
these
still
old
blocked
school
a black
parties
trans woman several times
that have a certain level of international recognition
and transphobic
and,
and misogynist,
and
all rolled up into one. Lots
we
of
attach
white
ourselves
men
to
on
newer
that
parties
screen right there
that have
that
a lot better
blocked
positions
a black
and questions
trans
of not going down the right opportunist line when it comes to tailing Democrats and that sort of stuff. And a good other portion of our institute has been involved in those parties, or is something new created. I mean, I don't think that we have a response right now. I think that it's important, however, for all of these groups to continue collaborating in an open way that allows for open dialogue, and that in time, if whatever group ends up actually taking up the role of leading the working masses, you join it and you work with them and you collaborate. I think that
Yasmin is a black trans woman in real life.
The sectarianism of the left, all of that has to be tossed
in real
aside.
life.
That's all the purity fetish. There's more in
there
common
are many
that
trans
we have
people
with
in my
each other
community.
we have,
I don't know why you guys hate trans people so
especially
much.
when it comes to the key issues of prioritizing the class struggle and the struggle against imperialism.
I want to say, I feel like we've been really lucky from the position of our institute, though. We've actually had some members in our audience who were part of the first efforts to unionize Amazon and Starbucks, and a lot of talk recently about UPS. We have a lot of UPS workers in the audience, including this comment from someone today. So it's almost like we're watching that vanguard form, in its early stages, as we're watching this sort of these forms of class struggle in these different workplaces rise up naturally with people who we know are in our audience. We know they're getting theoretically educated. So now you get to the question, I guess,
most of
do
the
you
people
push
that
these
are
people towards
watching their stream
those
are
party,
from my
the older
audience.
parties
I
that
hope
Carlos
people
was
realize
talking
that.
about? What's the importance of getting them organized
But
into a
whatevs.
party? Is it important at all, or is
Whatevs.
it just to is the fact that they're organizing their workplace good enough? I don't know. Those are some questions that I had arise too, listening to you guys talk.
I think those tactical questions are really important. I just want to mention really quickly, the Amazon Labor Union was organized on the basis of William Z. Foster's playbook on how to organize industrial unions. Everybody was reading that book and following it like sort of a guideline. And William Z. Foster, for anyone in the audience who might not know, was the chairman of the Communist Party USA
True.
at some
Socialist
of its
patriots
most
people.
important moments.
Very true.
He's the man who saved it from liquidation the first time. So back over to the question of tactics and, do we do this form or that form? I'm not sure. I just sort of do what I can where I can to help. And I think that it may end up just being very
Capitalism
spread out
ruins everything, doesn't
the
it,
way a
Roadrunner?
lot of America is. And maybe the way the PSUV in Venezuela formed. Just a network of different organizations that all came together because they all needed this done. And as time goes on in this country, things are needing done more and more.
On that point, I might just bring up two, I think, kind of touchstones, at least for me, in relationship to these questions. One is that the way in which Lenin both theorized and practically implemented the organization of the Bolshevik Party was by insisting on the fact that you needed a dialectical relationship between the working class and, he says very explicitly, the bourgeois intelligentsia, meaning that the intellectuals are those who have the time, resources, training, etc., in order to do a concrete abstraction from the immediacy of exploitation and understand the system of capitalism as a global system of oppression and exploitation. If you only remain at the level of workers' consciousness, you can have what Hegel would refer to as sense perception. You can have a very refined experience of exploitation and know things that the intellectuals don't know, because you know what it's like to be worked to the bone and feel like you're going to fucking die, or maybe just die for that matter. But that unity is so absolutely central to party organizing, because you need, the sense perception brought together with the understanding, if you will. And obviously you have to do that, to echo one of the points that Alan made, in a way that's not patronizing and talking down to workers, etc., and recognizing that there are intellectuals who come from an organic experience of the working class, I think, like many of us. And so in that regard, organization is essential for that dialectical work. The other point that I wanted to raise that touches on some of the things that Eddie and Noah were saying is that while trade union consciousness is absolutely important, there are also very significant limitations to trade union consciousness. And that's one of the reasons that I don't think that trade unionism is the vanguard that is going to save us. We need to take things to a higher level. The history of trade unionism has been a history of the struggle of labor against capital and has helped the working classes gain very important things in that struggle that should be supported and advanced, right? There's also the risk and the reality of the fact that in the history of trade unionism, you also have those unions and those people involved in unions who are willing to make class compromises because the end game is to improve the living conditions of them as individual workers or them as a group of workers in, for instance, a particular nation state or a particular region, not the overthrow of the capitalist system. Therefore, higher level of vanguardism that I think is necessary is party level vanguardism, in which trade unionism plays an essential role, but you move to the level not just of organizing labor against capital, but you move to the level of organizing labor in order to overthrow capitalism. And so, to echo some of the things that were being said earlier, yes, absolutely, let's support, not only support, but be involved in the union struggles that are going on, but let's connect those to a higher level of the overthrow of the capitalist system. Otherwise, we're just going to be constantly begging for more scraps from the capitalists. Let's get rid of them. Therefore, we wouldn't have to continue to beg for more or fight for more, because the system itself is not changing.
I also, just real quick, want to wonder just aloud how important trade unionism itself is in our era, with so few trade unions, so few industries and productive industries in the US. I think we may see more forms of economic rent organization, of debt strikes and things of that nature. And I think organizing along those lines, especially in coordination with the vanguard party, which I want to be clear, though it does sort of come into being as a vanguard, I am absolutely also interested in building. I think something like that, being able to coordinate directly against finance like that, would be very effective in our era.
Yeah, this is all again absolutely fascinating. And if I just can make a couple of points, I think again, Noah, something that you said, and then I want to connect it with something Gabriel said. You said something about needing things done, right? And I think that actually we are now living through a time, particularly in what I consider the most neoliberal financialized economies, such as the US and the UK, a level of breakdown of the system, which is really coming to the point where actually a lot of things need to be done, which capital and a capitalist state is unable to do. And, one way of thinking about revolution, revolutions are not planned or plotted, as in the lurid imagination of the right, that, sort of 5 people sitting beneath a bare light bulb plotting and planning a revolution. That's not how it happens. Revolutions happen. And I think revolutions happen when people make some of the most often limited demands. I mean, think of peace, bread, and land. Like, what was so revolutionary about that? But they seem to make some what they consider to be very minimal demands, and the system is either unwilling or unable to fulfill them, and the people say, all right, we're going to do this ourselves. And that's what a revolution is. And I think that, the time is fast coming when the collapse of the system is going to require a lot to be done, I would say, personally. Because, so then the second thing is that, to me, again, I don't claim to have all the answers. I think you guys are right to point out that it's really a difficult question, how exactly to organize and so on. But there are some parameters that are absolutely true. For instance, as some of you were saying, like, you have to go beyond mere trade unionism to a higher level. Absolutely. And that higher level is not doesn't arise abstractly in the minds of certain intellectuals, etc. It arises from the actual practices. And how will it arise? It arises because people are constantly talking to one another, saying, okay, we are doing this here, what are you doing there, etc. And which is why I often think of the immense amount of time that the Marxists of the classical era, and that includes Marx and Engels, but also people like Lenin, actually spent just corresponding with people elsewhere, trying to figure out what was happening elsewhere. I think, and this is much easier for us today. In those days, they wrote a letter and then waited for 5 days before they got a response, or whatever, 10 days, whatever. So, and so obviously that kind of networking correspondence is very important. But there is another thing, which is that increasingly we
That's
live
a good
in,
question,
particularly after
BT. You should
COVID,
head over to their chat and
more
subscribe and ask us.
individualized. We all live in our cocoons. We sit in front of
Only
our
5
screens.
minutes.
I'm sure that there is some utility to it, but I think unless
I would like to know the answer to this, though, communist.
Actual living communities, and there, different struggles combine. In the old working class communities of the past, which did achieve a fair bit in Western countries without actually achieving revolution, but they achieved a fair bit. it was not just about wages, it was about working conditions, it was about mutual self-help, it was about, rent and housing and whatnot, all these things. And I think that you have to have all of those things, but ultimately there is no politics without an ideology, that is to say a common way of thinking, and there is no ideology without a community where people actually feel they belong together. And I think that and I know the old forms of community are falling away very fast, but unless we build something new, a new form of community, I don't think we're going to get a politics. Otherwise, we're just going to get collectivism and stuff
He
like
shouldn't
that.
be. Vosh isn't that smart.
I just wanted to come in and sort of invert Noah's question and Gabriel's question.
That would be my answer, Kurt.
Should we expect the next round of struggle to come out of trade unionism? Well,
look, they think the famine in Ukraine was invented by
the German Revolution of 1918 was organized by the trade unions. You read Richard Müller's history of the
I don't
German
debate anyone. It's a waste of time.
Revolution. It's absolutely clear. He himself was a trade union leader. There was a revolutionary movement of the shop stewards in Germany, which coincided with the emergence of the USPD and the Luxemburgist Liebknechtist current. But the actual revolution itself was done by the damn trade unions. So you can't. The general point I take to be true, but there used to be a rule idea we discussed in my tradition, which is if you think of the three things that might happen, history always throws up a fourth.
Great point, Stephen.
Right? Or as Hegel would put it, the owl of Minerva flies only at night, or whatever. The reality, my friend, is green. Theory is grey. You cannot foresee. There is a tremendous tradition. I just look at historical tradition. Radhika has
I don't know if I want to, Gloria. I don't know if I can put myself through that. I had that would be worse than Chrissy Mayer.
Not just generalities, but specificities. Seems to me there have been huge moments in American history when the trade union movement has played a very key role.
I don't like talking about
other
Bosch.
forms of
I
mass
find
struggle.
him to be incredibly
So,
toxic.
for example, I think the formation of the CIO was clearly a transformative event that rose out of class struggle, and it overthrew the old domination of the craft unions, which is a crucial moment in the formation of a general working class.
Yes, they did say the famine in Ukraine was made up. I thought that was very stunning and brave of them.
Black Muslim movement and the Black Panthers played a formative role, and I think that Malcolm X was a formative vanguard leader with tremendous. That's why he was killed. That's why the American method of dealing with vanguards is to assassinate them. Okay, so you know who's good by who gets assassinated in general. It's a good rule of thumb, right? On the other hand, you had mass struggles like the peace movement. I think that the anti-Vietnam War movement, that was a huge movement. No one could have predicted that would have been the form that a mass movement would take. You had the civil rights struggle. You have one of the most successful movements against nuclear armaments that I've ever heard of, which is Women's Strike for Peace in 1953. It actually stopped nuclear testing as an incredible feat that our children owe so much to today, because, you're not dying of the strontium-90 fallout in your food. That was what everybody was getting in the 1950s. So and they organized through telephone trees of all things, right? So you can't predict the form that a mass movement will take. What you have to be doing,
I don't watch him, so I don't know. It would depend, I suppose, but I don't know.
Is to know what's going on, and the way in which Pravda was created, Iskra was created, I think was absolutely excellent. It said our task is to report the experience of workers everywhere in Russia, whatever that is. So, and Lenin had this marvelous phrase that every central committee must contain a thief. Why must every central committee contain a thief? Because we are aspiring to power, and therefore we have to know what's happening in all classes of society. So we have to know what the thieves think in order that we can deal with the issues that thieves raise. That's my concept of a vanguard party, is taking on from what Gabriel says about organic intellectuals, which draws on the whole experience of all struggles, of all working people, and seeks to express their common interest in such a way that hundreds of millions of people are drawn in. That's a huge task. I mean, we're trying to go from tens of thousands to hundreds of millions. That's not going to happen by effort of will. It's something that will be created historically. And to me, what's most important of all is to be alive to the possibilities of every struggle and not to stand outside it and diss it, which is why I think the purity fetish is such an excellent excellent way of talking about it. You know, when the Greenham Common anti-cruise missile movement started in Britain, which could have changed the course of history if it had prevented cruise missiles, the far left organizations stood outside and said, "Why aren't you talking about workers?" I mean, for Christ's sake, right? You know, it's insane.
These are highly practical socialists. I hope people are taking like ridicule them if you want.
And you had to support
They're highly practical.
Unconditionally, without demanding that it goes and supports workers' struggles.
This is a more strategic conversation than you might think.
You have to unconditionally support them without demanding that they meet a whole set of criteria, like being, you know, fully political aware.
I went to a socialist conference a couple weeks ago. Check it out on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. Spent all day with them.
At the point where they are, the vanguard is then that section of those mass struggles that understand its relations to other mass struggles. That's what a vanguard is. As the Communist Manifesto says, the Communist Party has no special policy and distinction for other parties, save that it represents the most general interests of the working class, as opposed to the interest of any particular section. Well, yeah, the working class includes many people who don't have jobs. In fact, most people in the working class don't have jobs, right? So they're going to engage in all kinds of struggles that have nothing to do with trade unionism. On the other hand, there's going to be trade union struggles, which cannot be ignored by the people who think, you know, the bourgeoisie tries to split off from the organized working class by saying working class, organized working class, privileged class, craft organizations, you know, fuck them, join Trump, right? So this is a bit incoherent, but the point is that it's the vanguard is the people who understands the common interests of all forms of mass struggle, whatever they may be.
I think one thing I want to mention, the Communist Party, USA, it is basically the one that built the CIO. 9 out of 11 of those unions were red unions. And it made me think of, when you brought that up, the union bashing that went on, right? The union breaking. And I wonder if we'll face something like that as this new wave of unionizations happens. So I know we've been on this sort of vanguard topic for a while, but if you guys want to change directions, I think anticipating the moves of the class enemy might be an interesting place to go.
Yes, let's anticipate
don't get me
the
wrong,
moves of the
stay
enemy.
on this topic
Let's
if
see.
you want.
Let's see how much you
I
guys
just thought
actually
I would
understand.
bring it up.
I think it's a great idea.
I wanted to piggyback off of something that the Radhika was mentioning about building community and the connection of building community to being able to achieve a certain level of ideological clarity. And I think that's very important. And one of the contemporary places where a lot of community building is done, somewhat unfortunately, perhaps somewhat fortunately, is the internet. And we've seen that there's an immense level of manipulation that the ruling class can do in that sphere, because it literally owns everything, not just the specific social medias, which can
they say the
use
famine
bots
in
to
Ukraine
promote
was a
certain
drought.
narratives, use censorship to diminish others, to shadow ban others, or to even ban others. You know, one of the things we mention often, because it's hit us fairly hard, is that TikTok, the most popular app in the country, our accounts have been banned 7 times now.
Really?
seven bans.
Isn't that
some accounts have gotten close
TikTok
to 400,000 followers.
communists.
We're getting millions of views with a certain level of consistency. And that affected our ability to create both community and ideological clarity at that level, at that scale. So how should we think about approaching those questions in an era where so much of that community building, of that war of positions, has to be waged in these ideological terrains that are associated with social media, with the internet, and where any success that you have, once it begins to grow into something that could be substantial in opposing the existing order, you can get the rug pulled under you. Because I mean, I was talking to Noah a while back, and even if you do create your own alternative places, people would find them through search engines that are still controlled by the Silicon Valley bourgeoisie, and that can still prevent you from finding those places.
They consider big tech to be bourgeoisie and the enemy.
Promoted
How funny.
alternatives to like YouTube or to Twitter, where people wouldn't be banned, but they would. You look those up, and
they have
don't
exactly the same problems as
Google search
conservatives.
engines. So there's so many infinite ways of manipulating the creation of community and the the war of position that we have to engage in necessarily in this day
That's
and age
the establishment.
after the technological revolution of the last 2 decades. So how do you guys face that problem?
Do you mind if I say something quick too? Just because that's kind of been, we've been waging that struggle on TikTok and on social media and stuff. And I think Noah and I have learned a lot this week from managing our Discord server. Like, one of the best things you can do, and this is really hard for people who don't use these social media platforms in their everyday life. But one of the best things you can do is understand the platform. Like, even our book launch today, there's a libertarian professor doing a live stream where they are trying to send people to disrupt our stream and get our stream taken down.
I didn't send anyone to disrupt anyone. I actually told them not to.
In the course of this book launch, I've been researching what I can do about it, and I've set our chat to subscriber only.
Oh,
you're Midwestern Marx for 10 minutes before you can leave a chat. So that's basically canceled out all of these libertarians, except for the ones who are really,
They're not all libertarians, bro.
But same with Discord, it was a long process,
and we expect them to be able to lead society.
We were able to organize a mod staff of people who are theoretically educated and active on the app.
I told people not to be disruptive.
Who are gonna run our Discord server in this community of Midwestern Marx followers, in a way that is organized and is helping people develop theoretically. And like Noah and I kind of had to learn how to use Discord.
Right there.
So I think taking those realms of struggle seriously as real places where people are getting organized and people are learning theory and learning how to use them.
That is the face of the cis white oppressive
like learning
male.
the platforms
right
themselves,
there, the face of the racist.
It has been really helpful for us.
Black trans women.
And then just being relentless, like constantly putting stuff out. Even no matter how many times they take us down too, but
I do
it was definitely a learning process for us.
Huge learning experience.
I'm sort of forever amazed.
Are they crying now? Are they crying because we're watching their stream?
Wrecking.
We literally wanted to listen to what you had to say.
A lot of the sort of purity fetish milieu, but what
we literally just wanted to listen to you.
One, it's in a better place now.
In the middle of your presentation, in the middle of your
book
launch.
At the end of the day,
that we're listening to you and amplifying your message.
The internet in general.
Don't you want more people to see your message? I'm just sitting here knitting, bro.
There's going to have to be done something at the level of the property question
white men.
On big
Cry
internet
more, cis straight white men.
Right? So Google, YouTube, Facebook, all of these, we're going to.
I literally told people not to be disruptive.
There was one thing that Trotsky did that
go back to the beginning and check.
And it was right before
told people not to be disruptive.
Of power. He wanted people in each of the economically important zones, so that when things went down, their people were there that they could trust.
I am not an authoritarian. I have no responsibility for what people do.
Bloodlessly as possible.
But I was extremely clear about what I wanted.
The ownership, right? And I think we need some sort of internet version of that, right? Like, why don't we have people working at Google? Why don't we have people working at Twitter?
You do.
Just stuff like that. I think, and for that, you need an organization that is serious and able to have its own.
It is like they are this pathetic.
Professional revolutionaries
it's so pathetic that they're winning.
Who can be sent out on these tasks
because they're literally crying about people.
The last thing really quick. The ruling class takes it serious. Like, there are NATO operatives who are running TikTok now. They've been hired on to TikTok's content moderation staff, and same with Twitter. We've seen the recent Twitter files debacle. The FBI pressuring Zuckerberg to censor information around the election. Like, the ruling class takes these, technological platforms serious. So I think we should too.
Just real quick on Twitter, it's funny how they always talk about Chinese censorship. Yet when TikTok was run by the Chinese, Midwestern Marx wasn't getting banned.
It was a way better app when China.
The Chinese don't like competition.
Well, that raises a really important question, right, about the relationship between tactics and strategy, because I think you are a lot more savvy than I am about online culture. And so the tactics that you're developing, please continue developing them, write manuals, share them, help others of us learn about them. But I have similar experiences at the level of what I would call more generally the bourgeois cultural apparatus, which is the entire system of production, circulation, and consumption of ideas and culture. And so I'm faced more on a daily level with where I can publish.
I didn't tell anyone to impersonate anyone. Find video of me telling anyone to impersonate anyone.
And I know those types of tactics more concretely, such as a Trojan
You
horse
guys
tactic.
caused it
I
by
could
banning people who were
write something in the New
asking
York
questions.
Times, but I have to do it in such a way that I can get it through their
I can't
censors,
control people.
right?
You guys, see, here's the
But
difference,
that also
Katie.
means that then
You
I'm
guys are
restricted. Basically,
authoritarians.
I can
You
increase
try
my
to
reach,
rule over other
but then
people
I
and
decrease
demand
what I
other
can
people
actually
follow
say.
your command.
And
I
finding
gave
out
very
how and
simple
when
guidance,
to do that, and those
and then
tactical
people can
issues are
choose whether
so
or not to follow
fundamentally
it. But
important.
I don't
But we
rule over
can't
any of the
delink
people
them
here.
from
They're not
strategy.
my
And
slaves. I don't
strategy,
tell
I
them what
think
to
at
do.
least some of you alluded to,
If you
is
want to keep
we
crying,
need
I'll
to
block you for
seize
breaking the no
the
whining
means
rule. But like,
of
Jesus
communication.
Christ.
We need to be able to own and control them. And this explains a lot about why certain countries are labeled as authoritarian when they want the freedom of self-determination regarding their cultural apparatus. They wanted to develop their own socialist cultural apparatus that is in the hands of the people, and more specifically the working class. And so the critiques of authoritarianism that are launched against China for restricting, honestly, at a kind of, you know, the great firewall, you know, you can go with a VPN and get around it. So it's not as if it's as draconian or as authoritarian even as people would imagine. But you can understand why an organization that regularly contracts with the Central Intelligence Agency, Google, Amazon, etc., why they would want to keep those platforms out. And so I think we need to struggle both at the tactical level, but always keep our eye on the strategy. And that is that socialism would mean that Eddie and Noah spend a lot less time, and all the rest of you, trying to get back on TikTok.
You guys
trying
really
to keep
need
your
to
shit
hinge
actually out there,
into the realm
because
of
that
reality.
tactical battle is going to be endless.
Go back
So
to the beginning of the
learn
stream.
how and continue
Watch.
to fight those tactical battles.
I
but
don't
keep the
control
strategy
people, bro.
clear,
But you whine one more time, you will
I
get
think one
banned.
of the things we should remember is most of the socialist movements of the 19th century, the ones who actually conducted revolutions, were essentially grew under conditions
they're
of massive
absolutely censoring
censorship.
information they don't like.
So, and they managed it.
Like the authoritarians they are.
The Bolshevik Party was
100%.
never operated under anything else. The German anti-socialist laws were the main object on which people actually struggled for a long time. And by the time they were repealed, there was already a mass socialist organization in existence. So we could go back. I mean, you know, this historical approach means you actually go back and read history, see what people did. It's very interesting. You read Lenin's famous imperialism, highest stage of capitalism, call it what you want. There's a beginning chapter where he describes all the things he couldn't say. He says, I couldn't mention this, I couldn't mention that, I couldn't mention the other. So censorship is always partial, complicated.
All right, so now we're going to start banning people for whining. I'm sick of this shit,
So
guys. I've answered the question numerous times.
Telegram or CGTN,
I didn't tell anyone to do nothing.
You bypass
I told people not to be
your
disruptive.
own nation's system of suppression.
Overtly. Several
engage
times.
in somebody else's system. I mean, there's not much actual suppression in Telegram. And the only thing you can't say in China is
you guys can't wrap your head around that. You're not as smart as you think you are. I'm sorry.
You can say more or less anything else you want. It's much freer than that, including in Russia.
Yeah, they're all just going to get blocked now,
what you find in the US or in my experience.
Not worth it.
Whatever. But the other thing is that I think there's a difference between reaching
people.
Well,
it would be nice if they did answer questions.
This is where
it would be very nice, but these people never answer questions.
If you have a union, if you have a peace organization,
how do they expect to reach out to working class Trump voters if they refuse to answer questions? Can someone please ask that? Can someone please ask, how do you expect to reach out to working class Trump voters if you refuse to answer good faith questions? And block black trans women. Okay, leave out that black trans woman part. But can someone please ask, how do you expect to reach out to and organize working class Trump voters if you refuse to answer questions?
VE Day is no longer called
VE Day. They just blocked Radical Moderate. Radical Moderate was being perfectly reasonable. I didn't even mention him because I saw him, but I didn't mention him.
Think about the
rewriting for asking reasonable questions
going on in that. So fascism is much more dangerous than censorship, because censorship doesn't kill you, right? Fascism does. But there are ways of dealing with censorship, which to me, the key difference is difference between organizing and reaching. So sometimes you have to find one way of organizing. And if you've got mass organizations within those, you can organize, and other ways of reaching. That's the way I look at it. And there's 100 ways you can reach people. So I'm less pessimistic about censorship than I am about fascism. I'm very pessimistic about fascism.
I just wanted to add, without at all negating anything Alan said or Gabriel said, all of which I entirely agree with. But I wanted to add that, the countries that are called authoritarian are not called authoritarian just because they restrict communication. They are called authoritarian because they restrict the right to property in various ways. They restrict the freedoms of capital
just like
in various
you
ways.
want to.
So, for example, while there may be, we've already agreed that there is in many ways more substantial freedom of expression in China than there is here. Effectively,
their chat is very paranoid.
But take Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela is called authoritarian, even though day and night, all the television channels, which are still owned by the Don bourgeoisie, the big bourgeoisie of Venezuela, spew venom at the Bolivarian government and all its actions. So this is going on. Venezuela are not restricting the freedom of speech, but they are, in the effort to develop their country, they have to restrict many of the, and in fact, they have bent over backwards to try not to restrict it, and they've only restricted the freedoms of capital when their hand has been largely forced. But that's the thing, capital does not give you development, which is why you have to restrict its freedoms. In the old days, the word tyranny comes from the fact that back in the days of ancient Rome, there were regular revolts.
Of course, because they can't answer questions.
And then when these
people are completely incapable of answering questions about their own effing ideology,
who essentially had to restrict the power of creditors, in fact, they were called tyrants anyway, and the word tyrant acquired a negative meaning or negative connotation.
The question is, if anyone else wants to go ask it, how do you expect to reach out to working class Trump voters
I think,
if
while I was
you
in
will
my
not
senior year,
answer questions?
just a clownish show of Juan Guaido.
How do you expect to reach out to working class Trump voters, as
Venezuela
Carlos
and
wants
then
you to do,
Maduro
as
as
the author
authoritarian.
of the book
But when
wants you to do?
Guaido would go to
Here's what you
popular
do.
neighborhoods,
You start out
the people would like throw
saying,
chairs at
hang on.
him. You remember those? They were hilarious.
Carlos, shut the fuck up for a second. Here's the question that needs to be asked. Carlos, in his book, makes the argument that socialists need to reach out to working class Trump voters in order to build critical mass for their movement. How do you expect to reach out to working class Trump voters if you refuse to answer questions? That is the question, based entirely on Carlos's book, which is the topic of this stream.
Perhaps they don't go far enough in their authoritarianism. But I think that the question of online. Sorry, I was going to switch to another topic. So
let me just say, this is an actual graph of Venezuela's media right here. I believe one of these is the state-owned media, and like 75% of their media is privately owned and anti-revolutionary. This is a little bit outdated, but it remains very similar to this day. So, the answer a lot of people say is for Venezuela to seize the means of communication, and which of course the West would
sounds kind of authoritarianism. That does sound
just
kind
real
of
quick. Whenever someone talks about the authoritarianism of Venezuela to me, I mentioned that the media is mostly right-wing opposition to the Bolivarian Revolution, and look what our country did to Julian Assange. Look what it's doing to Matt Taibbi right now for the Twitter files.
We disapprove of that too. We have so much in common. I disapprove of what they're doing to Matt Taibbi.
Movement, simply for challenging the narratives of this proxy war against Russia. But I was going to say, in the question of social media, the sort of principle that I see at play is something similar to the discussion that we were having before of the relationship of trade and social movements to a vanguard party, which is necessary but not sufficient. In each case, these things are absolutely necessary. Our involvement in them are absolutely necessary, but they're not sufficient. If you have everyone who has a Twitter account, subscribed to Midwest or Marx or something and agree to socialism, you won't have a revolution. You still have to do something outside of online, right? It's not sufficient in the sense that you have to do something more.
Twitter is not going to save you.
And as far as the fascist danger, there is an incredible fascist danger. For some reason, I still have this picture here of this UN vote. This was a vote from last year, I believe, on a draft for combating the glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism, and other practices that contribute to racism and bigotry. And I believe, if I recall correctly, it was 62 countries that voted against this, so that are perfectly fine with glorifying Nazism. And that number had changed from just 2 the year before. And what's interesting is that the same year that the US voted against this bill that would have prohibited the combating of Nazism, combating the glorification of Nazism, it voted in favor. It passed a resolution in favor of condemning the horrors of socialism.
No,
So
they're
it's
true
fine
believers. They're
to,
just
you know,
intellectuals who
glorify
don't know how to
Nazism,
do it in the real
but
world.
we must condemn the horrors of socialism. But I think part of the paradox is that there's a fascist threat today, objectively as bad as we've have ever had. Maybe not as bad, but it's getting up there. But a lot of the people using that language of fascist threat are using it in such a topsy-turvy manner to legitimize supporting the forces that have been fueling the real fascist threat. And I mean concretely, the fascist threat comes simply from Trump. To defeat that fascist threat, you have to vote for Biden. And that ignores the whole context of fascism, you know, being something much deeper. I recommend the work of Gabriel Rockhill on, you know, Now You See Me, Now You Don't.
I think someone did, but it's worth asking again.
Relationship of fascism to capitalism. And, you know, we're talking about a party that has sent $150 billion to Nazis. And we have certain communist organizations talking about combating a fascist threat by supporting a party that has given billions, hundreds of billions to Nazis. So
we don't support
it's such
funding
a
to Ukraine,
topsy-turvy arrangement,
or I don't
where
support it anyway.
the ones fighting fascism or Nazism, I think what's going on in Ukraine, it's Nazism, are the ones that are labeled themselves fascists and Nazis. So how do you traverse that those sorts of contradictions?
I just want to be real quick yet again here, and interject that I think the reason they genuinely think voting for Biden is
I think
going
Radical
to
Moderate just
help
had memory
fight
hold.
what they call the fascist
did.
threat, right?
Yep.
Because
Memory
somewhere
hole.
in the last
They don't want to
period
answer
of our
questions from
history,
Trump supporters.
they lost Marxism. Marxism got hidden somewhere, and they don't have a
Radical Moderate,
a
literally a
materialist
working
view
class Trump
of what
supporters.
fascism is. So for
They
them,
won't answer Radical
fascism
Moderate's
is just
question.
all the
How
mean
do they
rhetoric
expect
of
Radical
Trump.
Moderate to become a
It
socialist?
isn't a sort of
Like Radical
development
Moderate is quite literally the audience that Carlos wanted to appeal to. So
oppression
like, how do they expect
based
to do
on
that?
the inherent contradictions of capitalism developing to a point where they go into crisis, and we're not there to sort of create something new, right? And so for them, fascism is just an idea. It's, you know, extra conservatism.
Radical Moderate, can you just confirm that you are a working class Trump voter? And you were asking
that's
questions.
a really good point, Noah, because
and they claim to want to appeal to you, but they memory
fascism
hold your
tends to
question and refuse to
predominate, and
answer
that
it.
is
Can you just confirm for me, please?
It's a bad way of thinking, someone without a moral compass, someone who traffics in the politics of hate, etc. And what is lacking is a materialist analysis of how fascism has always historically been a mode of capitalist governance, and that mode of governance has taken on different forms, been called different things, but it basically mobilizes the full force of the state.
The question is, Carlos argues in his book that you need to appeal to working class Trump voters to bring them over to socialism. How do you expect to appeal to working class Trump voters
in that
if
regard,
you won't
one
answer
of the
their
things,
questions?
to echo back, and good, Carlos is back with us now,
and you ban them from your chat for asking them.
Point about what it means to struggle against fascism within the imperial core is quite different than in other contexts, particularly in the US, because the ruling class agrees.
They have
on
a
two
golden
fundamentals,
opportunity right now to talk to
imperialism,
working class
which are
Trump
basically
voters.
one
And instead of
fundamental at the end
doing
of the day.
so and answering
And
their
so
questions,
within
they're just
the
preventing them from
imperialist
asking
core,
questions
what
entirely
you have
and
is
shunning them.
a bourgeois conception
Seems
of fascism
a little
that
contradictory
tries to
to
label
me.
one imperialist party as fascist and the other as not, which of course creates a lot of confusion. And for anyone who is paying attention with the Biden administration, here we have a Democratic administration, like former Democratic administrations, that have pursued the imperialist line of supporting fascist forces around the world. Right? And there's a million other examples that we could point to in this regard. So one of the elements I think that's really essential to the struggle against fascism, because it is very much one of the most pressing
memory hold
issues
again.
of the day,
They deleted it
is
again.
to recognize
They are
that
refusing to answer questions from working class
like
Trump
the
voters.
United States have systematically relied on fascist forms of violence in order to prop up and perpetuate the empire. And they also do that domestically through their police forces and through organizations like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, etc. And so if we want to be serious about fighting fascism, don't fall for the bourgeois conception of fascism.
The next question is, if you want to appeal to working class Trump voters, then why do you keep banning them from your chat?
Fighting it and go to the
it kind of seems like you aren't serious about appealing to working class Trump voters, right? As Carlos argues in his book.
The symptom, capitalism is the disease, right? And that's the disease that we have to diagnose. Socialism, though, is the solution.
Yeah, Georgy Dimitrov, right? He is the guy on fascism, by the way, and he describes it as the open terroristic dictatorship of the most chauvinistic elements of finance capital, and then he sort of adds that the apparatchiks attached to that, right? And I think what they seem to miss is the same thing they always miss, and it always brings me back to that quote by Engels again, right? What these gentlemen lack is dialectics, in that they can't see that what is the most chauvinistic at any point in time is going to look different, right? What is the most chauvinistic in our time?
That's not how definitions work, actually. Definitions are not relative.
Who aren't a racist organization like the KKK was, in what we could actually call an embryonic fascism, fighting against Reconstruction, right? And so we have to be able to think about the essence of fascism as opposed to the particular form it takes.
Well, I think there's a number of things. I mean, I lived through a series of 5 racist murders in Greenwich, which were organised by a fascist party. It was a physical force wing of the British National Party, calling itself the British. Can't remember what they called themselves, British Socialist Idiots or something like that. But they had a bookshop and they organised gangs of kids to come off the working class estates and kill black kids. That's what they did. And anybody who has never had to comfort the parent of a child who is killed by them doesn't know what fascism is. And then anybody who's ever had, if you want to know what fascism is, it's you've organized a meeting.
Cobra Commander is an arrogant asshole. How does he ever expect to appeal to working class Trump
injure
voters?
as many people as they can in the most brutal way
Cobra Commander is basically destroying their socialist revolution.
I think that's there are other ways too, because it's based on racial superiority.
Stephen. It's a little bit of an unorthodox event, but we hope you'll come back.
I would say Steve Bannon is a fascist. There's no question about it. He's a conscious, organized, ideological fascist. He's got a very clear.
I think that's a great question.
Based on, the racial superiority of white people.
Why don't you guys want to work with radical moderate? You claim to want to appeal to him, Carlos.
And so on. I think Trump is a demagogue. I mean, I don't see Trump as a fascist. At the same time, the fascism does take organized forms. I think the Trucker Convoy was a fascist initiative. Fascistic initiative.
Oh my God!
It was inspired by the
Trucker Convoy was fascist.
And I have
think the Trucker Convoy was organized by fascists?
People who think that the Trucker Convoy was something that one needed to dialogue with. I don't think that's true. You don't dialogue with fascists. You smash them. And in the process of smashing them, you get across to the people who've been duped by them that they're in the wrong organization. And
how do you expect to do that? You won't answer questions
or anything like that. I don't mean you just get up with.
You're literally blocking anyone asking you about this.
In the sort of ways that some people did respond to the Trucker Convoy, by getting street street organizations go out and demonstrate against the truckers.
These
which was
people are
beginning to
insufferable.
happen
Yes,
towards
smash
the end of the
the
trucker convoy.
truckers, the
But
working class
Bannon
truckers.
and the Ukrainian right bloc and now the Ukrainian government itself are ideological and organizational fascists. If anybody looked at the debate that we organized with a
they
number
just
of
blocked
Russians
Nick.
speaking about the situation in Ukraine,
Nick says, I'm a
I would
trucker. They just
urge you
blocked
to
him
read and listen
because
to
he's
what
an obvious
Said Gafurov
fascist.
says. He says in Ukraine you have a civil war. It's a civil war. It's not a war. And the civil war began because the working class polarized between those who are primarily low working class and could be labeled as
they're arguing to smash the
Russian
working class right now. The true
and an organization
spirit
of
socialism is upon us.
Capital in lumpenized workers in association
But I
with
thought they
finance
wanted a
capital.
revolution of the
And he gives a very
proletariat.
telling point. He says the first act of the government was to dissolve the constitutional court. Now, immediately somebody starts talking about dissolving constitutional courts.
They're literally justifying blocking the working class right now.
On the ground and so on. And it's gone downhill ever since. I mean, just to give one example, there's now only one organization that you can belong to if you're under 16. There's only one youth organization, which is it's just like
because they want to control everything because they're authoritarian.
To educate the Nazi salute, and it's glorified. They wear armbands.
Thank you, Midwestern Marx, for showing your true colors. Rather exquisitely.
I commented the other day when we were going through a restaurant and
can't even answer questions from the workers. Want to have a dictatorship of the proletariat, but you can't even answer the most basic
stand up
question.
For Ukraine. Slava Ukraini does not mean stand up for Ukraine. It means glory to Ukraine. That's a kind of nationalism we have nothing to do with, right? It's not a struggle. It's not a liberation slogan. It's not freedom. It's not stand up for. It's we are superior to you. That's fascism, right? And it's same as imperialism. And so
right now, Midwestern Marx is being rather fascist in their chat.
Critique I would make of sort of Trumpism and Trumpite movements is not that they are fascist, but that they give credence to fascists, genuine fascists, which they shouldn't. The demand one might make with Trump, I mean, it's over now, but is break with Bannon, right? Break with movements that are
Midwestern Marx
fascist.
Blatantly disrespecting a black trans woman. Why is that straight cis white man blatantly disrespecting a black trans woman?
Exist. It's a
racist
threat.
And transphobe Midwestern Marx. Racist and transphobe.
It now knows it can only rule by means of fascism. That was the meaning for me of the Maidan coup. You had to put a fascist government in power and then use that as a basis to organize sort of worldwide fascist movement. So one has to be very concrete, but not to underestimate the danger, and not to. I agree with everybody.
I don't think we have to worry about them recruiting the working class Trump voter. I think Carlos's dream is going up in flames.
We got to vote for the liberals
which I think
because they'll stop fascism.
Because Carlos was correct.
Of the time, it's the liberals who get the fascists in.
Carlos was right.
That's what happened in Germany.
And now Midwestern Marx is basically shooting Carlos's dream in the foot. On the book launch stream. I just think it's beautiful. I really do. Beautiful.
Demagogic language. Or, do really bad things like, attacking immigrants and so on. But separate the two. Sorry, I'm rambling again.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is that this is something that I'm glad we're discussing this, and I'm sure we're going to wind down very soon because we've been going for a while. But let me just say, first of all, that when people think of fascism today, the thing that dominates the imagination is the Holocaust. People forget that even before the Holocaust, fascism was fascism. Okay, that's the first thing. Yeah, secondly, fascism never comes to power without the cooperation of garden variety capitalists. Only they bring fascism to power. They have regularly brought fascism to power. When Hitler and Mussolini first took power, capitalist classes across Europe and North America were supporting them in one way or the other, overtly, covertly, whatever. Apparently, I was reading somewhere that Hitler was inspired in writing his Mein Kampf and all his anti-Semitic rubbish.
Midwestern Marx, you literally blocked a trucker earlier that was asking questions. So I don't think the truckers are going to defend you today.
The second thing. Third thing is that after having very reluctantly been forced to fight fascism,
Hitler was a
capitalist
socialist.
powers then were in the forefront of preserving
Indeed.
many fascist forces in power in post-war Western
Oh, he's being
Europe.
very authoritarian
I
about
think
his
that's
chat,
another
isn't
thing we
he?
have forgotten. They also played a very big role in
Isn't
whitewashing
Midwestern
the
Marx
history of
being very,
fascism.
very authoritarian? Oh, wait, no, that might be
At the end of the Second
Is that an
World War,
impersonator?
the
Oh,
mass understanding
too bad.
in Europe was that fascism was the product of capitalism. But over the course of the next many decades, that intimate link was loosened. Fascism was then connected with socialism, and all of this rubbish
Because of
was
Hitler.
told, including by people who many leftists call leftist intellectuals like Hannah Arendt and whatever not. And the fact of the matter is that this has completely dulled our understanding of fascism.
Yeah.
So that's one set of points. So, and today we have capitalism in
Midwestern Marxist
greater
chat is
decay
not a
and
chat of the
disorganization.
proletariat.
We
It is
should not at
a
all be
chat of the
surprised
bourgeois.
if it
It
takes
is not a
recourse to
chat of the
fascism.
proletariat.
I don't know. I'm not sure I entirely agree with Alan about Trump, because I think there are two critical, there are many forms of what Poulanzas call exceptional bourgeois rule. That's assuming that parliamentary representative democracy is the
That's
normal
why they
form
really
of
hated
bourgeois
Trump,
rule. Then you
because
have
he was a
exceptional
symbol of the
forms. They
bourgeois.
can take the form of military dictatorships, but they can also take the form of fascism. How is fascism different from garden variety dictatorship? Because dictatorship in any case violates the rule of law. Okay, so the rule of law is already gone out. But the additional element
that's why they always call Trump a fascist. He's a symbol of the bourgeois.
Mobilization of parastate forces, the black shirts and the brown shirt variety. Why are they mobilized? Because the ordinary repressive apparatus of the state is not enough, or is not considered to be enough to keep the working class
they're
in
winning.
their place.
They're winning big time.
The mass of the people
it's
in
not
that
even
place.
close.
The working class is the mass.
So what does that say about us?
So you
that
deploy
they're kicking our asses.
As I say, either because they're objectively
Think about
necessary or not. Another reason why people say, we can't have fascism today because the working class is not strong. It doesn't matter if the working class is not strong.
You guys don't even like the working class.
You
block the working
a level
class.
of repression of the working class that is even greater today than in the past. So, and because you see, with Trump, you have organizations like the Proud Boys. These are incipient organizations.
A lot of the Proud Boys aren't white.
And I think that such organizations are coming into existence in a variety of ways. And then finally, I just wanted to endorse everything that Alan was saying. The fact of the matter is there are international dimensions to fascism, and the fact that major capitalist powers are openly allying with a fascist regime in Ukraine tells you something. It tells you that they, this is what they need today to consolidate their power.
1000%, Radhika. I want to make a couple quick comments because Radhika is right in one other thing, that we have been going for almost 3 hours now, so we're going to wind down here soon. But I want to say that
it's an impressively long stream. I have to say that.
Oh my God! I just lost my train of thought. I apologize. Oh, Trump
he was too busy blocking working class Trump voters.
I'm not entirely in agreement either with you, Alan. There are parts of what you're saying that I do agree with, but I think in the U.S., fascism is going to take a very modern American form if it forms, right? And this includes globalization. And my real focus on this is that who is really behind the Ukrainian neo-Nazi coup government?
Joe Biden.
It is our ruling class.
We agree.
And this relationship, I think, is key to understanding what could happen here. And I also think the relationship between the Democrats and Republicans will be part of that, and the continuation of the propaganda machine turning working class people against each other. And I think it will take a new, more modern form that incorporates that sort of thing, if it is to arise. And now, see me, I'm a terminal optimist, and I would think we can fight it, and we fight it every day. And I think as time goes on, our side, this sort of new overcoming of the old left, or the new left actually, is just getting stronger and stronger. And so with that being said, I just want to ask if if anyone has any last remarks they want to make.
I just wanted to make one thing clear, because there's been some discourse in the comments about people from the trucker movement who might have participated. I'm absolutely not against discussing with them. Absolutely
you
not against
them.
What I'm against
You
is
blocked them
supporting
from
them
the
or
chat.
joining them, which is a different matter. When the truckers came to Winnipeg, I went straight down there. I went and talked to them. That's what you do with any movement. The only way you can find out what a movement is about, go and talk to the people. And I was a bit careful what I said, because some of them were quite big and they had American
Good night,
flags.
Kurt. Thank you for
When anybody's
out.
carrying a giant American flag on Canadian soil, you have to worry. But nevertheless, I said, what do you think? You find out what people think. So and you can't defeat a movement unless you can debate with it, however bad it is.
You can't debate with it. You've been blocking people all night, asking you perfectly reasonable questions.
Any restriction.
You are
of
incapable of debating with people or
what I'm
even
against
answering
is
a simple
joining the
question.
truckers or supporting the truckers. That's what I'm against.
That was a useful clarification, I think.
There was no clarification. Every one of your actions has been contradictory to what you just said.
One of the things we never discussed is this whole no platform for fascists debate, where I change my mind every week.
Oh, now he's saying fascists shouldn't be platformed, while at the same time saying we have to be
part
able to
of that discussion has to be
you guys are authoritarians. Can we just admit
with
it?
the awareness
Can we just all be honest?
it's going to be very difficult to be correct, and that we have to be open to the different ideas that people are going to propose, because I think a lot of the time they're well-meaning, especially from
questions
in the debates going on within comrades. And if a thing fails, that doesn't necessarily mean that the person who proposed the idea is like a traitor to the movement or something. Perhaps things just went south. So I think with the censorship question, at least, it has come to a moment, at least in the U.S., where censorship has to be pushed back against. Some people argue that maybe this can be done in a way to appeal to the mass of Americans, in a way that appeals to like the First Amendment.
They just memory hold the trucker again.
We can do
just
this in other
blocked
ways.
another working class trucker again after saying we really should talk to the working class truckers, and then they blocked him again.
What ends up being the correct route to take is only seen after the fact.
Actions are louder than words, Midwestern Marx. We had such high hopes for you.
What you guys were just saying brings up
we really did.
something I think about quite a lot, and it brings everything back around to the purity fetish and it preventing people from meeting people where they are, right? Now, I wasn't near the trucker protest. I couldn't have gone there, but I would have if it were near me, just as Alan did, right? Because I know what my ideas are. And I'm not afraid to share them with those truckers,
is rebelling against them right now.
That when they are approached in the correct way, the mass of people there, rather than the leaders, the working class people there, will like these ideas.
They're saying in the chat, we can't have a discussion with disruptors.
That's going to wrap us up for the night. Does anyone have any
I've got
last
some thoughts when they wrap up, guys.
Like to say before we go?
We can't have a
I would
discussion.
just like to say
that's
thanks
your
to all
audience,
our guests.
bro.
And for real, I've learned so much from every one of you. Even when I was first starting out, Radhika's capital guides were hugely important for me. And Gabriel's stuff about the Frankfurt School was like really the last piece of the puzzle for me with I don't know, I don't want to say it like that because I'm not done learning, but it really helped put together what my principles were when it comes to politics and philosophy and economics. And Alan, your work's amazing and influential as well. So thank you all for being here. It's a great honor for us.
Thank you for this discussion. I mean, thank you is the word. It's a phenomenal discussion. And, the mere fact that we're having this discussion coming from three, at least, different traditions is testimony to a degree of maturity, which I think is what's required.
I just wanted to say thanks to Carlos, thanks to everyone, of course, but thanks also to Carlos for writing a magnificent and very clear book.
And none of you understood because you've been blocking working class Trump voters all night long.
Got to take the few hours it takes to read this book. And I think that so much will become clearer. So thank you very much.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah. It's really all about Carlos and the purity fetish tonight. So other than that, I also want to say thank you to our guests. You guys are fantastic. Radhika, your economic work is actually one of the inspirations of the current theory I'm working on that I call reproletarianization.
I just love this. They're shitting on Carlos's idea, like right in front of him in the chat right now, and none of them seem to realize it. And I will explain more once they wrap up.
All that being said, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to the Critical Theory Workshop and the International Manifesto Group, without whom this event would not have been possible and would have not have gone so well.
There's no such thing as MAGA communism.
And all three of you guys stick around after we go off air so we can, talk trash and swear and all that good stuff.
Thank you all again, and it's truly been an honor and a pleasure
to
discuss my book, the ideas, and other contemporary affairs with all of you.
All right. Everybody have a great night.
Guys, we're going to do a little wrap-up of our own.
Bye.
Hang on. We're going to wait till they go off air. Not going to fool us. All right, guys. Stopping share. Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? Now, I want to be very clear again, since apparently no one listened to me at the beginning. I don't rule anyone. I give guidance, and then you guys do what you want because you're adults. I told people not to be disruptive. I was very clear. And I don't think most people were. What I saw was people asking questions that they then refused to answer. And I think the most ironic part is, when Carlos was talking, and I think Carlos is very, very, very smart. I really do. When Carlos was talking, the idea that really caught my attention, excuse me, was when he was talking about trying to appeal to working class Trump voters to get them to realize how oppressed they are. Because honestly, that was an idea that I had right after January 6th. And if you don't believe me, you can go back. I did an interview with Yanya Karlik of the Epic Times all about this, where I said the smartest thing that people could do is realize that MAGA has more in common with ordinary BLM activists, not the organizers, but ordinary BLM activists, than they have in common with the establishment. I really do believe that MAGA and more populist left-leaning people have more in common than MAGA does with the establishment, and that populist left-leaning people do with the establishment. And I said this over 2 years ago now, that the smartest thing that could happen is if MAGA and the ordinary BLM activists would realize how much they have in common and team up against the establishment, who is the real enemy. Now, of course, that never happened, because political tribe's going to tribe and the establishment is going to do everything they can to create division between the two. But I thought it was really interesting. Beth, you saw that interview? That was an oldie but a goodie, man. I still do believe that. Carlos has come to the same conclusion, that what the socialists need to do in order to grow their movement to a point of critical mass is they need to reach out to working class Trump voters. And there's historical precedence for this, guys. There was the Rainbow Revolution in Chicago in the 60s? 60s or the 70s, where the Black Panthers reached out to the KKK and they started working together. And that was what got Fred Hampton assassinated. Anyway, there is precedent for this. The establishment gets really freaked out when working class people from opposite political sides team up and they go to war with the establishment. However, and I was really worried about that at the beginning. I was like, oh shit. The socialists have figured this out. The socialists understand that they can reach out to working class people and probably, make some progress. But then my concerns evaporated as we watched their stream unfold over the course of things, and we discovered that every single time a working class MAGA voter went into their chat and asked them a completely reasonable question, they would just block them. And then they would make some excuse about why they couldn't answer the question, and they would mischaracterize who I was, and they would mischaracterize who you were, and they would mischaracterize what I told people to do, and they would lie, and they would cheat, and they would smear, and they would do all the things that socialists are prone to do. And then they shit on the truckers and they called them fascists. And then a working class Trump voter who is a trucker went into their chat and was like, what the hell? And then Radical Moderate, who is also a working class Trump voter, went into their chat and was like, can we ask questions about this? Because Carlos has literally argued in the book that this was a book launch event for, that you need to reach out to working class Trump voters. Well, guess what? Here we are. We would love to ask some questions about your movement. And not only did they refuse to answer the questions, but they blocked anyone who dared to contradict what they were saying. So I guess what I want people to see from this is that even sometimes if they have the right idea, their minions will completely fuck up everything. Because I'm going to bet that if Carlos was running this and he had a chance to have a conversation with a working class Trump voter who was asking perfectly reasonable questions, I'll bet you that Carlos may have actually engaged. I could be wrong, but I bet maybe I should invite Carlos on my channel to have a conversation. Carlos, what would you say to working class Trump voters? Because I can deliver you an audience of working class Trump voters, and we will ask you reasonable questions about your ideology, completely good faith questions. I want to see if Carlos would actually have a conversation with them. Because as you guys know, I'm not voting for Trump again. I don't care about Trump at all. So it really is no harm, no foul for me. But I do have a lot of working class Trump voters in my audience. But sadly, the people running the event and running the organization did not want to interact with working class Trump voters, even though they published Carlos's book. Even though allegedly they read it, they refused to answer the most basic question. They called truckers fascists. Like, you're honestly going to tell me that truckers are fascist? Really? So I would really like to hear from Carlos. I'm not joking about that. I've had leftists on this channel before. I may just invite Carlos on the channel to have a nice civilized conversation. Carlos, I understand that in your book launch, they blocked working class Trump voters from asking you perfectly reasonable questions, and this is the audience you claim to want to appeal to, and they were blocked from asking you questions. So, Carlos, I just want to give you an opportunity to actually answer questions from the working class Trump voters that you claim to want to appeal to. I would invite him on the channel. He could say whatever he wants to say. No, I'm not open to having Eddie on because Eddie blocks working class Trump voters, and I just don't think that's reasonable. I just don't. I really don't. But I don't know. I thought that was a pretty good use of an evening. Not so bad. But guys, guess what? This isn't the last socialism stream we're going to do this weekend. It is about the first socialist stream we're going to do this weekend. And tomorrow, we are going to be watching our good old friends, Red May. It's a surprise Sunday special stream. And this is going to get started at 2 p.m. Eastern time because our friends over at Red May are streaming a presentation called We Have Never Been Post-Industrial. And in this presentation, there is Nick, who is a communist engineer. There is Philip, who is a communist geographer. I didn't know there was such a thing as a communist geographer, but you learn something new every day. And there is Wendy, and I have followed Wendy on Twitter for like a while, and Wendy is crazy. And Wendy is a communist startup founder and software engineer who got her master's degree at the London School of Economics, which is openly Marxist. So we are going to be streaming this stream, and I've called it a communist engineer. Oh, engineering, I got to change the title. A communist engineer, geographer, and startup founder walk into a bar And we're going to be doing that. I'm going to start the stream at 1:45 p.m. tomorrow. They are going to get started at 2 per usual. And I mean this, I'm not messing around. I don't want disruption in their chat. I really don't. I'm serious. If you have questions that are reasonable, then, I can't tell you what to do. I encourage the asking of reasonable, good faith questions, but I don't want nonsense. I don't want shenanigans. I don't want shit posting. Not in my name, because you saw what happened today. They tried to use everything against me and, say that I caused this when I blatantly told people not to do it. But again, guys, I can't control you. And I generally mean this. Like, I can give guidance. I can say what I want. I can frown upon things. But that doesn't mean that I control you. All right. So we're going to be doing that tomorrow. As a reminder, I will be sending out my Unwoke Roundup newsletter on Actively Unwoke, my Substack tomorrow, which is carlin.substack.com. I'm going to be working tonight on an article about that woke equity conference too, so hopefully that'll be up tomorrow. And in the newsletter, we're going to have our supporter perks for the week. If you want to support the work I'm doing, make sure, first of all, you have mounted that like button for me. Make sure you are subscribed to this here YouTube channel, or on Odyssey or Rockfin or Rumble, wherever you might be watching. And if you want to financially support me, you can sign up on my Substack for $5 a month, $50 a year, whatever you like. Well, you're subscribed to my channel, bro. And you had to be subscribed for at least 5 minutes to be able to chat in. So you obviously have some idea who I am. $5 a month, $50 a year supports the work I'm doing and gets you access to your supporter perks, to include 2 weekly Zoom calls with me, to include access to our supporter Discord, and to include movie night tomorrow night, which we are watching Killer Clowns from Outer Space tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be great in the supporter Discord. I do look forward to seeing people then. And you can also pick up your Be Bourgeois merchandise in the Unwoke Art Store, just in case you want to give a middle finger to the capitalists, or not the capitalists, we embrace the capitalists, just in case you want to give a middle finger to the socialists. There's my latest design. It is our Fox Be Bourgeois design. I've got it on t-shirts. I've got it on hoodies. I've got it on the great black mug that everyone loves. I've got it on stickers. I've got it on posters. If you want something else, just let me know in the comments of this post and I will see what I can do. Guys, well, no, I'm just stating facts is not defensive, but you're not here in good faith, so you can go away now. Guys, that's going to wrap us up for tonight. Thank you for hanging out. I thought it was a very eventful stream. We will see you guys tomorrow at 2 p.m., 1:45, give or take. Have a great rest of your night, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.